and welcome back to Script Notes, or a Script Notes special. Well, we're going to be, you can kind of see what we're doing on screen already, but we've got something very special, very unique lined up today. We've never done before. I suppose that Off-Meta have done something kind of similar, but we're taking our own angle on it. And as those of you who have been around for a while will know, on Script Notes, we often like to invite a special guest on and talk about a script that they've written, and then see where we're going with that. But today we thought we'd do something slightly different. But I keep saying we because I am, of course, as always, joined by Navian. Hi, Navian.
Hello.
We're going to be talking about characters today rather than scripts today. It's an exciting change.
But notably, because this is Script Notes, we are still going to relate it to script making. Don't worry.
Of course we are. And that is the thing that we're going to be doing today. We are going to be talking about Blood on the Clocktower characters, but we're going to be doing it from not how much we like the characters, and not how powerful we think the characters are, which are the two most common ways to build those scripts, but how well we think that those characters can have scripts built with them, and sort of how good they are from a script builder's perspective. We're going to be kind of taking this one a little bit more off the cuff. Or at least I've not really put any thought into it so far. I don't know if you have.
Not hugely. So yeah, we're just gonna both be deciding on the spot a bit.
Yeah. So we're going to be winging it. And we actually had a quick conversation before we started about what we're sort of going to be judging it on. And I think that there are really two sort of main categories here that we can look at. We've got characters that will fit onto a script, like characters that will fit really easily onto a script, and then we've got characters that will make a script interesting. I think those are the two sort of general categories. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
We also have I've made this tier list with all of the Blood on the Clocktower characters, including, as you can see, Travelers and Fabled. So we might have to add a sixth category, actually, for characters that have absolutely no influence on script building whatsoever, like I don't know, the Fiddler. That doesn't really come into your thoughts when you come up with how you're going to build a script, really, does it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Maybe we should have a category for like no impact.
Yeah, I'll add that right now. As you can see, the tiers are not labeled. That is because if you want to, you can use this tier list to make whatever you want. You can make your favorite characters. I will actually. Can you post a link in chat, because I can't really do it without without minimizing the window. If you've not got it, it's fine. I'll post it later.
The link for this tier list.
Yeah, just a link to the tier list. I think I sent it to you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can do whatever you want with this tier list. It is up to date. We have the Knight and the Steward on it, so I will hopefully make a commitment to keeping it up to date. Although I can't promise anything as more characters are released. But as of now, this is the most up to date Blood on the Clocktower characters tier list, and it's the only one that has all of the Fabled and Travelers. But yeah, those are the categories that we're going to be using, and I think that the way that I'm kind of looking at it is that the very top characters are going to be ones that you can like really build a script around, and they're going to be ones that, but they're also going to be characters that you can really fit into any script and make them better. So I think that's going to be the top S tier of characters. Whereas the middle tier are going to be ones that you can kind of do either with, either characters that you can like really build a script around, or characters that you can really fit into any script. Whereas the bottom ones are going to be ones that really require a script built around them, but even when you do that, it might not necessarily be the most interesting thing on that script, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are sort of the criteria that we're looking at there. Obviously, we are two different people, famously with different tastes. So we're gonna have disagreements. Where we have disagreements, we're gonna try and take an average. if that's possible. And if that's not possible, then we'll either alternate, or you can decide in chat if you think that one of us has made a more compelling argument. And we will look into what you think to decide. Does that sound fair?
I think that's fair, yeah.
Oh, I accidentally opened part of stream. That's fine. Yeah, thank you for posting the link. Okay, but let's get right into it, because I think that's everything that we need to talk about. So the first character that we've got is the Acrobat. Do you want to kick us off with talking about the Acrobat, and then I'll talk about the Alchemist, which is our second character?
Sure. So the Acrobat has recently had a ruling update on it where it no longer procs as soon as it triggers. It procs only at its turn in the Night Order, which I think is a little bit more helpful in making it an outsider, but I still think that it's very difficult to fit into a script where it's not just going to be a townsfolk. So I put it in C tier.
Okay, that's interesting. I broadly agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to go even harsher on the Acrobat. I think that this is our first, and I don't think there's going to be many of them, but I think this is our D tier character. I think there are two.
I'm okay with that, actually.
Yeah, I think there are too many situations where the Acrobat can just solve games as an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with knocking it down a peg to D tier. I was being generous. You're right.
Yeah, but one that I do think is a C tier character is going to be the Alchemist. I think the Alchemist, when it's on a really good script, can be really, really good. Don't get me wrong with that. I think the Alchemist can be so much fun if you've got a script built around it. But too often I see people being like, "Oh, people like minions. Let's just throw an Alchemist on the script," and it's got like, I don't know, Alchemist with abilities that really don't work for an Alchemist to have, like maybe a Fearmonger, which can be unfun for everybody involved. And hot take, I think Alchemist Goblin is overrated. So I'm leaning towards the C for the Alchemist. What do you think?
I agree. It's a C tier. There are some minions that it works great for, but its pool of minions that don't just like fuck the game over for the evil team, or even some where it fucks the game over for the good team. There are some roles that are like, people are like, man, I really do not want a good player to have this ability because it just screws us. There's a few too many of those for Alchemist.
Yeah, I think that Alchemist is weirdly a character that is going to go up the rankings as more and more characters get released. Because
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah, I think there are some characters that it works really, really nicely with that are not out yet. But for now, as things stand, I think C is where Alchemist falls.
Yeah, I agree.
Anything you want to say about our friend, the Al-Hadikia?
Really difficult to write a script that's not just a solo Al-Had, in my opinion, because you're going to know immediately whether it's an Al-Had or not. So it's not uncommon to see solo Al-Had scripts. As a demon, it's certainly unique. I think that it doesn't play well with certain things that are helpful for other demons. Like, for example, I don't really like protective abilities in Al-Had games because, one, you're potentially just a liability for your team and killing more people than you're saving. Or two, you're hard proving yourself in that cannot be faked by evil. And I think both of those feel bad. So I would put Al-Had in... Oh, I kind of want to say D tier, but I feel like that's a little too harsh, so I'm gonna say C.
Okay. I was also sort of cusping a couple of them, but I was cusping B and C because I know what you're saying about Al-Had not working with a whole bunch of characters. Like, you can't really put Minstrel or Goon, or you can put Goon if you build really carefully. I mean, we'll get to Minstrel. I'm not sure.
I hate it.
I'm not sure where Minstrel's going to... I mean, I'm very sure where Minstrel's going to land up, but we'll come back to that one later.
Yeah, we'll get there when we get
there. You can't put it with protective characters easily. It's funny, but really, really broken with Maya. You can have 4 people die, none of whom are the Maya. Because you've got all 3 of the people who are picked, including the Mayor, say live. Except the other 2 say live and the Mayor says die. And then a different player dies because of the Mayor's ability. And then all 3 of the players who picked live well, the 2 players who picked live and the mayor who picked die all lived, so they all die. Except the mayor doesn't die because their kill bounces to a different player. So 4 players die, but the only person who doesn't is the player who picked die. I just think that's terrible and also funny, but shouldn't.
Okay, but focus
happen.
on the first part, right? Like, it's funny, yes, but funny doesn't mean something belongs in B tier in terms of its workability on script building. But if it's that broken, it does not get to B tier. No, absolutely not.
But I do think that if you build a script around it carefully, like you say, it's very much a one demon script, one demon script demon script demon. There we go. But I think that the scripts that have an Al Hadikia on have such a strong sense of identity that kind of does bump it back up. However, I do understand that I was describing Al Hadikia and I was saying, here are some things that are absolutely terrible. I love them. That's not good script design.
Right. So I think if you're looking at a role and you're like, man, this really only works well if it's like the only demon on this script and you have to build the entire script around it, it doesn't deserve a very high ranking in terms of script building.
I think there are some characters that describe that do, but we'll get onto them.
I think it gets C because even though you're doing that, you can still make an interesting script out of it and an interesting demon out of it. That's why it gets C tier instead of D.
Yeah, I think C is a good compromise. We're both like, it's probably C, but I could see it being this one. So we're both in C. We're just in different areas of C. So we'll put it in C. Amnesiac is an interesting one because it can do absolutely anything. I think it's really hard to build a script around the Amnesiac because of that, which maybe knocks it down from S, but I think that's the only thing that does knock it down from S. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that just if you've got if you know who's going to be running your script and you know that they're gonna do something interesting with it, and ideally if it's you, because like you can put an alchemist, and Amnesiac on a script knowing things that you're going to do with it, and if you're writing a script for yourself to run, I suggest you do. I think that does take it up to an S tier because it is the perfect character for like finishing off a lot of scripts.
Yeah, the question is whether that makes it interesting in a script building perspective, right? Because there's a perception that when you have an Amnesiac on a script, it's often there because the script builder went, well, I'm not really sure what else to put here, and Amni can technically fit anywhere, so let's just throw an Amni on, right? So I agree that it's very, very versatile. It's versatile because of its sort of lack of actual ability. But I think where it starts to kind of fall apart is the interest level. What is it actually doing on this script? And that's limited by the storyteller who is running it. So I'm kind of on the cusp of like A and B as a result because it's incredibly versatile and that gives it high points for that. But its interest level to me is sort of middling. And there's also certain things like you would, I hate Amni on a Vortox script, at least rules as written. And I think if you have to house rule around something, that should sort of take away from it a little bit.
The Vortox is a problematic little Strunkly that I think is going to come up a few times in this discussion.
Quite possibly, yeah. So I'd put it somewhere between A and B personally.
I'm happy to compromise to sort of a low A because you do make a good point about Vortox. That isn't something that I really considered. What do you think, chat? Let us know what you think. Where does the Amnesiac fall? Is it a B tier? Is it an A tier? Is it an S tier? Let us know. We'll probably end up putting it somewhere between A and B, I think. Probably A. But if you've got strong feelings, let us know.
I could see it as like a low A.
Pithag will break a few scripts. We'll get to Pithag. Angel.
I'm gonna put that in not applicable.
I agree. So do you want to talk about The Apprentice? Getting into our special characters.
Ooh. All right. So Apprentice certainly has the flexibility to it, right? It can be literally any townsfolk or any minion on your script. However, I don't think that makes it S tier. I think that it's an A tier because I think that there are some abilities that it is stupidly powerful to have either two of them in play, which you can do with an apprentice and should be thought about. But there's also I don't know. I mostly see it with minions where like solving the minion types that are in play is super, super important for like solving the game. And if you add that extra minion ability in the apprentice it makes it like almost too hard on the good team. So like I kind of want to put it in A tier for high levels of versatility, but like maybe be a little bit careful. I honestly think that's like I think some people think that apprentice can just go anywhere because it's you're just having an extra townsfolk or minion. But I think balance wise, that's actually you should be thinking about whether that actually fits on a script or not.
Yeah. So you're leaning towards A/S or A/B?
I would actually just put it solidly in A. I'm not kind of cusping on it. It's just an A for me.
Okay. For me, it's A/B. Because I think that the case that you've outlined is actually worse in the opposite direction. Because there are a lot of characters that the apprentice just doesn't work with at all. Like it doesn't work with a goblin, and I see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because and people often like to go, let's just put, like you say, people could just go, let's put an apprentice on the script. And half the time when you look at that, the characters that it's on with don't really do anything. It doesn't work with Goblin, it doesn't work with Boom Dandy, it doesn't work with Baron, just to name three of the characters they've got on screen. To go with the fourth one that I've currently got on screen, Evil Twin with an apprentice is silly.
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean of like it technically has a lot of versatility to it, but you really kind of need to actually scrutinize your script and be like, but does it make sense here? Because there are a lot of abilities where it doesn't. It either does nothing or it does too much.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards I'm happy with an A. I'm happy with an A for that one.
Okay.
Should we tentatively put the Amnesiac in the A tier?
Yeah, I'm all right with having Amni as like a low A.
Okay. If you have chat, if you think it should be either B or S, then let us know. But for now, it is where it is. Artist. I think that the artist is a very powerful character, and again, it looks like it's going to be a character that's really versatile and will go anywhere, but it's not. The artist on a lot of scripts, if you don't have one of several characters, actually, I think the artist is too powerful. Just because it's the only character that can really do what it can do, in that it can solve so many important questions to the game just outright. Obviously, that artist does have to be trusted, and I don't think that there are some people who'll say the artist is any once per game character. It's not. It's not a chef. You can ask the artist. You can ask the artist question: would a chef get a 1? And if you get no, you've not got the chef's ability. If you get a 1, if you get a yes, you've got a chef's ability. But if you get a no, you've not. So I think that the artist is actually a little bit too strong, and I'm leaning towards the B tier here.
I would probably put it in A tier. I think that as Curb21 actually has just said in chat, no Vortox can make the artist be a bit too strong. And you do have to, like, there are other things that you can do to help mitigate that. Like if you have a high poison or drunk script, you can still probably get away with an artist, but like you do still, you have to keep that artist's power level in mind if you're not putting a Vortox on. So I would put it in A.
Okay. Well, we've got B and A as our thoughts for the artist. I think another thing that you can actually do to mitigate the artist, because a lot of people at the moment like to use the artist's ability to ask, are one of this half of the Grim the demon? And I actually think that something you can do to get around that is a recluse. Just to, like, think of a more interesting question.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, there are ways to get around the way to get around that, but, you know. I'm leaning towards B. People in chat have said that they want artists to be an S tier. I don't think it's S tier. I don't think it's A tier, but I'm willing to give you this one just because there is that upwards vibe from chat. So we'll drop artist into A for now. Assassin, what do you think?
So Assassin definitely, I think it has the interest level in terms of like what it can do on a script, but when you have that extra kill ability, you probably also need to be thinking about, cool, so how can I hide this ability so that it's not just immediately known that it was an assassin kill, which means that you have to craft a script that has some amount of extra kills happening. Which means for me, the assassin goes into B tier. It's pretty versatile, but it does sort of it tends to narrow some of your script building choices as a result of having it on there.
I was thinking B. That was my gut thought for the assassin. I would be okay with C as well, because I think the other thing that the assassin needs is some kind of boon that it can get from the other parts of its ability, even if for some reason they could not. Otherwise, it's a fairly ineffective minion. I think it needs to be able to punch through a innkeeper protection or a goon drunkenness to really get the full flavor from its ability.
Yeah, I can agree with that. You need something that would normally stop other things, but not an assassin as well. That does make it more interesting on a script.
Yeah, but I think that's both a positive and a negative for the artist. Sorry, the assassin. So I'm happy to go with B. Atheist. Oh boy. Wherever we put this, it's going to be controversial.
True.
You really could put this in any of them. So I think there is a dimension to this that we've not really talked about before, which is how is it for players of different experience levels? Because like the artist actually, I think, putting it into the A tier is that it's got such a low floor that anybody can get their hands on it and use it in an interesting and helpful way. But it's also got such a high ceiling. Sorry, it's such a high floor, but it's also got such a high ceiling because you can go like there are cases where it'll be a really interesting character to look at. That experienced players can really get something out of. The Atheist very much skews towards experienced players and a very experienced storyteller. So by itself, ignoring anything else that's on the script, Atheist makes people not want to play the script.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is something that you, as a script builder, I think I don't want to play that script is kind of a signal that you've done something wrong as a script builder, even if that something that you've done wrong is a single character. So I don't think we can put it higher than a C. Is it a C? Like I want to put it higher. I love Atheist. I think that some of the most fun games I've played in Storytold have been Atheist games, but that's the character, not the character as it is script building. I do think that there's enough that you can do with it, and prepare some really interesting games from a script building perspective that it's a C, but I would be okay if you want to put it in D.
No, I'm okay with C, and I'm okay with C because, as Willow has said in chat, Atheist kind of needs to be on a script where there are interesting interactions that can happen that the storyteller can essentially like fake happening. I think that an Atheist is as interesting as what your storyteller can do like to the players with what's on the script, what puzzle building they can do. And I think that you have to kind of make your choices when you're building an Atheist script based on that a little bit. Like you can't just throw it. Technically speaking, you can throw Atheist on anywhere and it technically works because the storyteller can break the rules. There's like, so there's like, it's like the same thing as why the Atheist has no jinxes. You can break the rules, you can do whatever you want. So technically it fits in terms of like where you could throw it on, but in terms of where it's actually interesting, that I think requires a lot more thought put into it. So I'm okay with C.
Yeah, I think C is where Atheist lands then. I think just to for those of you who are just joining us and didn't catch our intro, we're looking at all of the characters in Blood on the Clocktower and ranking them from S to D tier on where they are, how good they are for script builders specifically. Not for players, not how much we like them, not how fun they are, not how powerful they are, how good they are for script building. We're doing that on two matrices, or two main matrices, although I did just bring up a third, which are how easy they are to have a lot of interesting and fun interactions with them, and how well they fit onto just any script. So for those of you who are just catching up, hi. You can go back and watch our thoughts on all of them when we're done. But for now, we're going to talk about the Balloonist. What do you think about the Balloonist?
So it offers a form of outsider manipulation, which I think is an important part of script building. However, it interacts very poorly with quite a few types of like misinformation or misregistration. So I think I'm on the cusp of like C to B, but I'm leaning more towards C, I think.
I was, if this had been up to me, I would have thrown Balloonist into D and left it at that. I do appreciate what you're saying about the +1 outsider as a hugely important tool for script builders. But I think that's what people see when they see the Balloonist and forget about everything else. So I think that the Balloonist for a lot of script builders is a bit of a trap. I think.
Okay, but that's not the role's fault. That is an individual script builder's fault. We need to evaluate the role and not where people fall into traps with it.
I think that the traps that a character can lay out for a script builder are something that we need to consider, particularly when there are so many scripts that have a balloonist on them that fall into those traps. Like a balloonist doesn't work with a lot of characters that might be higher tier characters from a script building perspective. And I think that even that, the fact that it doesn't work with those characters is something that brings it down. I'll go C. But my instinct with this one is that it's a lower C rather than a higher C, but I'm happy to go with a C.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being sort of on the lower end of C.
Barber. Barber's a tricky one. It is a little bit weird. Well, first of all, it's not 100% clear on the rules. We don't need to get into that discussion. It is a little bit weird with demons that can kill multiple times, because the demon doesn't know, even if they do know that they've just killed the barber and that they weren't executed during the day, they don't know who the barber that they killed was. It pairs really well with characters that can change other characters, like a pit hag or even a farmer. So it does have a lot of interesting interactions. And it doesn't really fit badly onto any script, because it can always do something as an outsider. I think there are times when it can be too outsidery if you're not careful. But I don't think it always fits brilliantly onto a script either. And for me, that makes it a B tier character. But I'm willing to hear you out if you have a different opinion.
I don't believe in such a thing as an outsider being too outsidery, pretty much. So personally, I would put it in A tier. I don't think it belongs in necessarily every single script. And I do sort of understand what you're saying, where there are situations where it feels maybe worse than others. I can understand that. The thing about like Barber is that if a player is not using it thoughtfully, it can just result in, more or less like a farmer chain of sorts. But that's on the player for using it that way. I think I've definitely seen Barber cause a lot of damage in particularly Poppy Grower games where where Barbers died early, the evil team don't know each other, so they just, I don't know, the demon just does something and it ends up backfiring in hilarious but really fucked up ways.
I was the barber in that game, Nathan.
You were a barber in one of the games I'm thinking of, yes. So I don't think that it works for every script, but I would put it in A personally. I think there's a lot of versatility to it, and I think that when you have a barber dying late, that paranoia of, oh God, was there a barber swap between the evil team and we just need to completely flip who it is we were planning on killing, makes it a really, really strong character.
Okay. I will let chat decide this one. Because I think this is a B tier, you think this is an A tier. Go vote. You got a minute.
Yeah.
So barista, how do you feel about the barista? This is a really interesting one.
I think barista probably belongs on, like, there's a reason it's on S&B, and it probably belongs on custom scripts that are more S&B related than, say, like BMR. It belongs on things that have a lot of information and probably like several sources of misinformation. As a result, in terms of like its flexibility, I'd probably put it in like C tier.
Okay. I was once again leaning towards a B tier.
I'm okay with B as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with C. It looks like you're going to get your way on the barber. We'll put that into an A. So let's give the. Well, I'll explain why I think that the barista is an A. Is a B. I think that there are enough characters that can, even if the barista's ability was just each night a player is is sober, healthy, and gets true info. Even ignoring the other side of that, I think that that's really quite easy to build into a script, and I think it's really quite useful to build into a script, and I think it has some really good interactions. There are also some really interesting things that it can do that we don't necessarily need to go into, that just can make for good games when it's in play. But I don't know. I think it is quite flexible, and I think it's a little bit more flexible than necessarily you give it credit for.
See, I think it's less flexible than you give it credit for. I can think of several, like BMR roles in particular, where it's like, cool, I'm sober and healthy, but actually that may not help me because knowing whether I was like drunk or poisoned gets me information about my ability working or not. Like I was a sailor once, and the evil barista made me sober and healthy on night 1. And at first you hear that and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then you think about it and you're like, wait, but that makes my choice completely nullified, because if I get executed today, I don't know whether I was drunk or poisoned because the barista made me sober and healthy. Like there's a lot of roles I think where it sounds good what the barista is doing, but actually when you think about it, maybe it's not.
I think that even that instance is a little bit interesting because like that's an evil ability.
No, I hated it.
Helping.
I mean, it was good for the evil team, yes, but it also, to me, outed the barista as evil immediately when I figured it out. I tried to get that barista exiled and nobody listened to me. That was the most evil thing that I could have seen a barista doing to a sailor.
And I think that's interesting, but I appreciate that you didn't enjoy it. I do think characters messing with other characters' abilities in unconventional ways can feel rough, but it can also be interesting, and I think there's a balance to be struck there.
I think it's interesting, sure, I can grant you that, but I also think that it knocks its versatility back.
And I think it increases it. Let's send it to chat again.
I don't.
All right, chat, you've got a minute to let us know what you think of the barista. Wait, no, sorry, I put A and B. Ignore that poll. New poll. Like, I don't think it's the most interesting character to put on any script, but like that's where B is. Like, it's middling.
I think it takes more thought than you're thinking of to make it actually work.
Okay, well, we'll see what people think. The Baron. Whose turn is it to start with? The Baron. I think it's mine. So the Baron is. I think the Baron. The arguments in favor of the Baron are the argument that you made in favor of the Balloonist, but more so because it's actually helpful for its team. It's actually not something that could easily be messed with. I think that the Baron is a simple character that's hard to build a script around, which maybe takes it out of S tier, but I think it's at least A tier.
I agree, it's A tier.
Okay, good.
I think that it's not quite S tier for me because it really doesn't work with everything, you know? Like a lot of other outsider modifiers you don't necessarily want or need to put with Baron. You have to kind of think about, okay, well, if I have a Baron that's going to put all 4 outsiders in play in base 2, base 2 places, then base 2 games. Sorry, I couldn't remember the word for fucking game. Jesus Christ. Anyway, you put a Baron in a base 2 game. I'm going to get all 4 outsiders. How do I make it so that it's not immediately guaranteed that it's just a Baron game and everybody hard believes the outsiders, right? So that's why like Drunk is on its home script. So there's that little bit of play there. So I think that you do need to be a little bit more considerate than you might first think when you actually put a Baron on the script.
No, that's absolutely fair. Baron definitely plays best with hidden outsiders, but I do agree that it's still a solid A tier.
Yeah, very solid A tier.
How do you feel about the Beggar?
Beggar is it plays more interestingly with misregistration, which is probably why it's on the script that has misregistration. But I think it's pretty versatile anyway. I also think of it more of a social traveler than I think other people do. I think rather than gaining your information from actually getting that ghost vote and learning an alignment, your ability might actually be more about like who's willing to give you their vote and why, um, than it is about what you actually learn from gaining the vote. But it's very very versatile in terms of script building. It could slot into quite a lot of scripts. I'd probably put it somewhere in A tier.
Okay.
I don't think it's necessarily a good traveler to or fun to be, but I think it's very versatile.
Yeah, I was torn between A and B tier. I don't think it has anything horrible that you can that like it breaks. Maybe it's not too fun with Legion. I don't know. But
yeah, it's probably less fun with Legion, but I guess you could make an evil beggar there. That's fine.
But I think that's also true of a lot of travelers, to be honest, that they don't travelers in general don't work great with Legion.
Yeah, that's more Legion.
Yeah. But yeah, I can't think of anything that really breaks with a beggar, but aside from, I suppose, Spy and Recluse, I can't think of anything that's really great with it. But I'm okay putting an A tier.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember and remind chat as well throughout that like we're evaluating this based on how well and how easily they can go on scripts, not necessarily how good of a role it is or how fun it is to play or how strong it is. It just script building focus here.
Which is going to be very relevant for our next character, the Bishop, because I don't think the Bishop is a very fun character in general, but unless you've got a town crier or a witch on the script or a fearmonger on the script, I think the Bishop can be it can be a traveler that you can build scripts around, and it can be a traveler that doesn't really break with anything apart from those aforementioned characters. So I think this is AB.
I would put this solidly into A, and the only reason that it's not S for me is those roles that you just mentioned where it doesn't work with those particular things.
Sure.
So I have it as a high A.
Yeah. Bone Collector, what do you think?
Oh man, Bone Collector is a really interesting one.
It is.
My gut, I almost want to put this in S. Like, there are some things I think that maybe don't work great with being bone collected, of course, but like I can't really think of many arguments for it. Like if you're a like let's see, tea lady for example, maybe it's a little less useful, or maybe it's really strong. Hard to say. I don't know. I kind of want to put Bone Collector in S.
I would find it hard to disagree with that. I think about the characters that Bone Collector doesn't work the best with. And yeah, you're struggling to find any that either don't have some upside to that interaction or aren't that bad. Like, it can feel bad to like out as a damsel and then get Bone Collected and have the evil team immediately know who the dead but with an ability damsel is. But like, if you know that you've got a Bone Collector in play, you can easily play around that, and that's kind of a downside, but with its countering upside. I think that there are characters that it doesn't really do anything with, like it doesn't do anything with a gambler. So maybe don't Bone Collector gambler if you want to do anything interesting.
Okay, yeah, Gambler is about the only one I can think of.
But something that you can do, it can also be super, super strong, and perhaps a little too strong with some once per game abilities. Like, I can't think of an exact example, but of minions and demons that it wouldn't work with. But like, imagine Bone Collecting an engineer that's already done engineer shenanigans, and you just take a particular minion out of play. Just the appropriate time, and then put it back into play again when it's no longer useful. But Bone Collector is a super interesting one because it's the only one that you can like design. I think it's one of the best travelers to design a script around, because you can also put, like, when you're designing a script, if you're putting travelers on it, you're probably putting 5 travelers on it. And Bone Collector is really the best traveler for interacting with other travelers.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I'll put Bone Collector in the S tier. We have our first S tier character. We also have the Boom Dandy, which is quite hard to place for rather different reasons to the Bone Collector, because again, it doesn't. It's a character that you can't easily build a script around. Like, it can be done, so that's definitely going to keep it away from the top tiers. And there are a few characters that it's a little bit wonky with. Like, anything that's likely to diffuse a Bone Collector, sorry, a Boom Dandy, is probably not going to be too much fun. Like, Minstrel opens a whole new can of worms. I'm saying the word minstrel a lot this stream. I wonder if that will come back later. But Preacher, it's not as bad as other characters with as Preacher is with other characters, but it's not always the best. I think that Jesus Christ, that the Boom Dandy, this is what we get for doing them in alphabetical order, falls quite neatly into the B or C tiers. I would lean B because I think it's a little bit inoffensive whilst having some neat things that you can do with it. But I've also found games where it's just been pointless or not fun. So I wouldn't mind if you think it's a C tier.
I actually think that it's an A tier in terms of versatility, and like it's a quiet minion. So well, until it's not, but then it's too late, right? It's a fairly quiet minion, so it can hide well in many minion suites. There's a few roles that it works very awkwardly with, like things that can survive during the day. Other than that, like, there's not really a whole lot that makes it difficult for me to place. So I put it in A.
I think that the Vizier has kind of weakened the Boom Dandy a little bit, because like there's a really interesting interaction between those two, but I don't know if it's to the benefit of it as a script building. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. How do you feel about Boom Dandy and Vizier on the script together and in play together?
I think it's middling. It's not like the most devastating thing, but I do see that it could quite likely end in more or less like the same play patterns over and over, which is maybe less fun.
Because on the one hand,
it's kind of just like it's not the worst thing, but it's also not great.
Just to explain my thoughts to on that question, on the one hand, the Vizier can go, all right, the Boom Dandy's got a good vote, they're dead, and now boom. But on the other hand, they might not want to, and they might not want to execute the Boom Dandy at all, because the Vizier has to survive and it becomes a 50-50.
Right.
So,
I think it's middling,
Yeah. And I think that what interesting interactions are there with the Boom
Dandy? Interesting interactions. That
you can build a script around.
Boom Dandy is, in my opinion, largely about the paranoia that it can create around the nominations executions phase, right? Oh, this player wants to die. Do we actually want to kill him? So you can load your script with roles that would say want to be executed for an Undertaker or a Cannibal, and you can play into that paranoia of, here's a whole bunch of people who are looking to get executed. How do we feel about that? The way that you want to play Boom Dandy a lot of the times is like you want to be a little bit suspicious enough to get executed, but not so suspicious that people just read that you're a Boom Dandy. And I have seen that happen as well, where people are just like, oh, this is just a Boom Dandy play and we know it. So I think that in terms of in terms of when its ability goes off, that's where you hit the awkward with certain things that can survive during the day stuff, as opposed to like where its main portion of what it's doing most of the time is the paranoia, right? Like there's paranoia even if there's not a Boom Dandy in play, because you're paranoid about a Boom Dandy being in play.
Okay. Yeah, I see your argument. I suppose that characters that, like, you load a Boom Dandy with characters that want to die, maybe put a Fearmonger on there, and you've got a good script, just with the Boom Dandy. So I'd be willing to go to an A. I do think that those characters that don't then die to it do cause problems with it, as with the potential diffusals.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why it's an A and not S for me.
That's why I would still lean B, but I'll put it in A for now. The Bounty Hunter, I think you're up. Some poor boom dandy.
Bounty Hunter, you need to be very, very careful about putting it with other alignment changers, and that inherently takes it quite down to probably like a B tier for me. I think it's in general fairly versatile, but it's also easy to make the Bounty Hunter be almost like too strong, right? You have to pay attention to your misinformation that can happen on a Bounty Hunter script. Otherwise, it's just very easy to overrun town and sort of like be the center of attention everywhere. When evil has no, like, when a bounty hunter gets trusted, if evil has no way to like get rid of them easily or make their information not trustworthy, it can feel a little bad. So I'd probably put it in B tier. It needs a script that does keep in mind the fact that there's going to be an extra evil and how strong that information is, even at the cost of an evil townsfolk. But like that evil townsfolk doesn't know who their evil team is most of the time and therefore can't coordinate with them. I've seen evil townsfolk accidentally like solve the game for the good team for whatever reason and like end up losing as a result. So yeah, I put it in B tier.
I came about this from a slightly different angle, but I also ended up with the B tier character because I think that the bounty hunter has radically different power levels depending on the script that it's on. If it's on a script with hyper powerful ongoing minions like a Cerenovus and a Pit Hag and a Devil's Advocate and so on, awesome. That bounty hunter is thrilled, even at the cost of creating an extra evil. But at the same time, if you put it on a script with an Organ Grinder and a Vizier and a Leech and a Goblin, it poses script building challenges, the Bounty Hunter, but they are script building challenges that have interesting solutions, and that's why I agree that it's a B.
Sure.
Buddhist is going straight into not applicable.
Yep, absolutely.
Bureaucrat. Do you want to handle Bureaucrat and Thief together? Because I feel like they're different characters and they do slightly different things, but I think that where we put one of them is going to end up being where we put the other.
Yeah, I'm fine with just kind of slotting them together. So Thief and Bureaucrat, I think that they're fairly versatile, but I also think that in particular with Bureaucrat, maybe more so than Thief even, you should probably think about like how many extra evils can this game have? Because if you have a Bureaucrat in a game that has extra evils, that might be quite rough, right? Whereas that's a little bit less mitigated with Thief, who isn't adding extra votes to the evil team. They're just taking one away. Really funny when they're together and you get that -3 vote. That's absolutely hysterical. So I would, I think that with certain roles, they can maybe be a little bit less fun. So things that want to get executed, like a Boom Dandy or a Goblin or Fearmonger, those can make, again, in particular, Bureaucrats more affected by that actually than Thief is, in my opinion. But Thief to some lesser degree, same thing. So yeah, I'd probably put them in like B tier.
Interesting. I really like these two as for script building purposes, and I think you can fit them into most games and most scripts without too much of a problem. I think that it breaks with a few characters. Again, Travelers don't play nice with Legion in general, but I don't think that I think that they do play badly with characters that care about execution. I think they actually play quite nicely, with the exception of characters that completely skip execution, like the Virgin being the most obvious example.
True, yeah.
But even then, they are TB Travelers, so like that is clearly intentional.
Right, yeah.
I actually think that they play quite interestingly with things like the Boom Dandy and the Goblin, because if they, like, you have to take a risk to use them. Like if you particularly the Goblin, if somebody claims Goblin, then somebody votes for it, and that magically has 3 votes. It might be time to look at the person who got those 3 votes and also the Bureaucrat and kick them out of town. And you can most of the time still still get around that and like really muster the votes.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I would have put these in S tier. I think that they are characters that you can drop into any script, and I think they do have enough interesting interactions to justify being put into that top tier.
I'm happy to compromise into an A.
Okay, I'll do that. I think they are S tier for the opposite reason that the Bone Collector is S tier, in that they fit more neatly in places where the Bone Collector doesn't, but they aren't as interesting as the Bone Collector is. But I'm happy to go into that compromise option. The Butcher. I think that the Butcher is a really tricky character to build scripts around. I think that when it works great, but it needs characters that care about executions, and it needs characters that, and it needs to avoid being in a place where it can really overwhelm one of the teams. And I think it fits nicely into script where it fits nicely, but I think that it can be not suitable for a lot of scripts. So I think this is another peak B tier, but I'm willing to hear what you think.
No, I need to hear more about what you think, because I put it into S tier.
Okay. I think that the Butcher, I'll say that it does some interesting things with, obviously it's a prime witch candidate, which is always interesting. But I don't think it works. I think that it can be overwhelming to any game where the evil team has a numbers advantage, whether that's through Legion or whether that's through adding 1 or 2 extra evil players, because suddenly you can find yourself really low on good players and evil just stomp. But at the same time, it can also be not the best if you've got no way out for a demon. If you've got a really immobile demon with no backup route, because in that case, it's in that case, the good team are more likely to win just through chance, and that doesn't necessarily feel like the best way to win a game. I also think that it's a character that works best with mechanical info, because it requires that trade of info rather than mechanical abilities, unless those mechanical abilities relate to executions. Because I think it makes that trade-off of information for being more likely to kill evil players, because you get more kills for the good team. So I think when it's evil, it can, if it's not in a carefully built script, it can really overwhelm the good team. And when it's good, if it's not in a well-built script, it can really catch the evil team just by surprise.
Maybe, but I mean, I think same thing that you said about like bureaucrat or thief, that like the good team can, players can exile a butcher at any time, and in particular, even in a Legion game, like you can just exile a butcher because the Legion vote restriction doesn't count for it. So if Legion thinks that the butcher is good and is just going to keep killing them, then they can exile the butcher, or if they want to look good, they can exile the butcher at any time. I guess I can be swayed by the argument of if you do have a script that has extra evils on it, then that can get to the point where the evil team is just overwhelming the good team, and the butcher can almost like make that problem worse, especially if the butcher themselves is also evil. But at that point, like, that's a storyteller issue, wherein if you're having extra evils in the game and you have a butcher who's going to be around until late game, like, I think if you have an evil butcher plus the ability for extra evils to be in the game, then you need to know that that butcher is going to be leaving your game early to prevent that issue. Otherwise, make the butcher good. I think that that's something that maybe we shouldn't be taking into account here, is storytellers messing up on what alignment they should actually be making their traveler, because they're not good at looking at the balance of the game and making the right choice there. Like, I can put it in A tier.
All right, we're compromising this one to A as well. Butcher plus Vizier is a comment from chat. I can see that being interesting. I can see that being quite evil-sided, whatever happens, but I can see that being interesting. But maybe the Vizier needs that that power boost, but we'll talk about that later. The butler, what do you think?
Mullabach, if you're in chat or when you watch this back on VOD, this is the moment that you need to clip. Butler is S tier, baby.
Go on.
I mean, okay, you can't go wrong with a butler. It fits in any script that you want it to fit into. It really doesn't have any particularly bad interactions. You can even, on a Legion script, if you have experienced enough players, you can even put a butler in a Legion game and watch them try to use their ability to watch votes influence whether they think that it's Legion or not. Butler Innocence Project over here. Butler it fits in everywhere, and it doesn't have any bad interactions. Also, I think it's Jinx with the organ grinder is really interesting.
So once again, to chat, we are not judging these characters by how good or interesting they are in themselves. We're judging them by how they are for script building purposes. I completely agree with everything that you've said. The only question that I want to ask is, you say that it doesn't have any bad interactions. Does it have any good interactions aside from, like you just mentioned, the organ grinder Jinx, which I do think is interesting, but does it have any good interactions?
I do actually think, again, with a higher level of experience group, I think that the Butler Legion can be good situationally, but it depends on who pulls it and what they do with it. I think that it can also have interesting implications in other games where there are extra evils, because it makes them more likely to choose an evil player if they're just sort of choosing at random, right? And that's sort of like something that a butler needs to be paying attention to while they're still alive, is you need to be picking players that you think that you can trust. And if there's a way for there to be more players that you can't trust on the script, that makes you, like, honestly, a bit more of an outsider, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, no. This is absolutely an S tier character for the purpose of script building. You can clip that bit as well, Mullabach, if you like. The butler, it's a great outsider, but again, that's not what we're judging it on. But it is a character that will fit anywhere, and I think that it has, on the sort of hidden third access that I mentioned a while back, it is a character that has different levels as you look at the game in different ways as you get more experience with the game. So yeah, I think that it is a character that, even though it doesn't have too many mechanical things, I wouldn't argue with you if you said no, Butler's an A tier character in this context, but I think it edges into S.
Yeah, if you just said A, I probably would have been like, I can see that, but I'm Butler Innocence Project, S tier, let's go.
Yeah. So the cannibal. The cannibal is another weird one. I think that the cannibal needs to be different to the Undertaker on the script that you're building it on. It needs to have something that it can do with its ability. It needs to, in a sense, it needs to have the potential to be stronger than an Undertaker, because it can be tricked by evil players where the Undertaker can't. So it needs to get something in return for that. I think that the cannibal needs to be placed on a script that, with outsiders that aren't hugely punishing, if they get executed, they can be a little bit punishing. I think a damsel is fine. I think that a recluse can be interesting in a couple of different ways. Obviously, everyone loves to see a cannibal goon. I think cannibal snitch is quite funny. But I think that there are other characters that I don't know. You probably don't want to see like I think that cannibal can be rough with outsiders that can kill in a number of different ways. So with the golem, it can either be too powerful for the good team, or it can get rid of characters too quickly. But I think that's not too much of a downside. Whereas with the Moonchild, you can really churn through characters and so on. What else have we got? I think with the Tinker, that's another one. I probably wouldn't, in most cases, want to kill a cannibal Tinker, because at the end of the day, cannibal is a townsfolk. And at the other end of the scale, I think that Cannibal needs to have some interesting townsfolk characters that it can really get some utility out of. So I think that Cannibal is a tricky character to put on a script. However, when you put it on the script where it works, where it has a lot that it can do, where it has where it can get some utility out of its ability, that sort of rhymes. That takes it above that level of an Undertaker. I think that that is a good script that you've built.
I agree.
So I think that it scores highly on interesting interactions and poorly on can fit in anywhere, which is why I think it's a B tier character.
I agree with everything you said.
Awesome. Cerenovus.
Pretty versatile. Yeah, like you're causing some form of misinformation in a not direct way, right? By forcing players to claim something that they're probably not in most cases, and potentially cutting days short with getting somebody executed. So usually a good player, right? So good is losing a good player plus potentially time during the day. Fairly versatile. It has the Goblin Jinx, which is hilarious. Yes, Molobach, the butler is where it belongs. You need to go back and rewatch what was said earlier about it. You've been instructed for something. Anyway, Cerenovus, I don't know. Can you think of any negative interactions with it, other than potentially how a person might individually feel about Cerenovus Goblin?
Pixie. I think that the Cerenovus forcing a pixie to not be mad that they are the character that they've been shown by the storyteller, which I think is a shame because I know that a lot of people put Pixie and Cerenovus together because they look like they go well together because they both have the word mad in their abilities, but they work against each other in a way that can feel really unfortunate for the Pixie. Similarly, Mutant, but Mutant is an outsider, so that's fine. I think that's the only example, though. I think that I agree that the Cerenovus is a really versatile minion. And I don't know if that one interaction that's probably not that bad because it requires the Cerenovus to be picking the Pixie probably on the day that the Pixie dies. I don't know if that's enough to justify knocking it down any tiers. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think that's enough to knock it down a tier. I've ran plenty of scripts that have Cerenovus and Pixie, and the amount of times that the Pixie does get chosen and the Pixie gets chosen enough to ruin their own ability is actually quite small. So I don't think it's Saint is fair. But I mean, consider Cerenovus is on its home script with Evil Twin, and Cerenovus just choosing the good twin over and over and over again. It can kind of that's already a built-in interaction in its home script. So I don't think Saint is necessarily inherently too much worse, but it is slightly worse.
I'd say the difference there is that if you're Cerenovus as the Saint into, let's say, the chef, you can go, "Hi everybody, I'm the chef, but I really don't want to be executed. Well, we're just going to execute the chef and feed the Undertaker. Yeah, but I don't think we should execute me. Why should we not execute you? Because I'm definitely the chef." And you're kind of in catch-22 there. Whereas if you're the good twin, whereas if you're the good twin that gets Cerenovus, you can go, "Hi everybody, I'm the clockmaker." You don't.
But I'm the good. You can still have a good twin, right? Yes.
So I think that's the difference.
I will say that there are ways around that. For example, saying, "Oh, well, why shouldn't we execute you?" Well, I'm definitely the chef. No, you make the argument that you're a good player. And also there are ways to sort of subtly indicate, I've been in that situation before where somebody was a saint, but they were bluffing as something else. They weren't Sarah mad. They were just hard bluffing as something else. And there's ways to sort of say things that imply things to players, and hopefully the players can pick up on it. But I agree it's not the best interaction. I guess it goes into A.
Was it Avery? It's usually Avery when it's the Saint.
No, it wasn't. It was Emma, who was actually the Saint, but bluffing as Butler. And I've seen it somewhere else, too. I can't remember who, but somebody else did something similar to me recently where I was like, oh, this is a Saint claim, but for whatever reason, they don't actually want to say Saint. They're just hard pushing of no, I'm a good player. You absolutely should not execute me, even though I'm claiming a role that is fine. It's not fine because I'm good.
Yeah.
Implying things breaking madness. It can be, but also you as a storyteller don't have to do anything about it if it's subtle enough, if a good twin is being Serenovus locked, are you just going to king make the game? Probably not in most instances. I allow a lot more leeway and a little bit more of that towing the line for players who are in that very, very difficult situation. You cannot flagrantly break it, no, but if you're doing things that are subtle enough and that can be said to make sense from a different perspective, then sure, you're allowed to do it. If you are hard saying, do not execute me because I am a good player, and you're not claiming Saint, well, if people want to pick up on that's the Saint, then sure, they can do that. That player hasn't broken madness.
I agree. And I think we've highlighted two things that, like you say, the storyteller can get around. But other than that, Serenovus is really one that fits quite neatly anywhere. I think this could be an S tier character from our purposes, but I'd be okay with
A. My initial response is S tier. I think the Saint makes me kind of make it a low S.
I don't think one character that it works poorly with and one character that it works with is enough to take it out of S tier for me. So I'm happy with a low S. All right, let's talk about the Chambermaid for a bit. I think that the Chambermaid is one of the most flexible BMR characters, and therefore it's C tier.
Yeah, I love Chambermaid, but Chambermaid's strong and often too strong.
It's really hard to build a script around the Chambermaid, or including the Chambermaid. You need to have demons with different wake patterns, or you need to have some reason that the Chambermaid is getting wrong info. That's readily available.
When you put Chambermaid on, you need to pay attention to the wake patterns of both good and evil team, because you need enough variability in it that evil can bluff things in their wake pattern, and also good players could look sus, or evil players could look like different evil players, so you aren't just automatically finding your demons everywhere and they can't look like potentially a minion instead. Like, yeah, it can be difficult to put a Chambermaid in a script without it becoming like easily the strongest, way too strong character on it.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of talking myself more and more into D tier at the moment, because
me too, actually.
Yeah, you need to have such a specific roster of evil characters for Chambermaid to work.
Yeah, I love Chambermaid. Don't get me wrong. This is such a good character. But in terms of script building, it's so fucking hard.
Yeah, it's a D tier.
I think maybe it does belong in D.
It's a D tier character. And when I said that's one of the best ones easiest to blend in from BMR.
Yeah.
Chef. You're up for Chef.
I would put it into probably... I'd probably put it into cusping on A and S tier. Very, very versatile, but also can be too strong if you're not paying attention. Like, on its home script, it has Drunk, it has Poisoner, and it has Recluse and Spy misregistration. So there's actually several things that can potentially mess with your chef's information. And I think if you're putting it on a script with like nothing that can mess with its information, it's easily too strong. So you do have to keep that in mind when you're making a script, which is why I want to say it's not quite S tier for me.
Yeah, I was going A tier into B tier because I think that the chef is a character that on some scripts can start knowing more than it necessarily should. Like, it can start knowing if it's a Legion game, just off the top of my head, or if it's a Vortox game on some instances. But I suppose then it probably, well, in the latter case, in the former case it does, but in the latter case it doesn't bring the info that it really should be doing, so that kind of makes up for that. I do think that Chef can be a little bit too powerful without the Recluse to go against it, and I don't think it plays great with outed evil characters. I don't think it's good. It's great with a psychopath or with it's an evil twin, maybe. Goblin, no, like that sort of thing. I do think that, and this isn't necessarily relevant to what we're talking about here, but it can be super interesting with some of the travelers that we would be talking about. But yeah, I think A into B is where I land on this one. So
yeah, that's fair. I think I think that Chef is actually so. How interesting one thinks Chef is with outed evil characters on a script is probably a bit. I think we might differ a little bit in that. So, like,
Okay.
I think if the outed evil, if players out as evil, then yes, it's probably really really strong and not great for their team. Which means that I think that it pairs really poorly with Vizier because Vizier doesn't get a choice in whether they're outed or not. But things that like where a player can choose to out as like for example the psychopath or the goblin, if you see that Chef is on your script, maybe it just acts as a counter to automatically doing that, and it makes an evil player think a little bit more of like, okay, am I going to do this, and if so, at what point in the game? When is it strategically the good choice for me to do that? And I think that can be interesting, but I can also completely understand why some people wouldn't like that because it feels limiting in a way that may feel bad as opposed to a way that may feel interesting for some people.
Sure. I'm going to skip Fireboy for now because jumping back onto that conversation. Actually, that's a good point. I don't actually. I want to talk about the Clockmaker because we just spoke about the Chef, and Clockmaker is next anyway. I think that Clockmaker is not necessarily more powerful than Chef, but a little bit harder to script build with than Chef. So I think this one is B into A.
I can agree with that.
Okay, well, see everything we just said about Chef for Clockmaker.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more tricky to script build around because it gives much more specific information. And it's always information that's about the demon.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I don't know, to be honest, I almost want to put it into C tier as a result because like it works even less well with those outed evil players if they do choose to out. And again, don't put it with a Vizier. Like that just fucking feels bad. I think that it can play interestingly with misregistration, and that's something that I like doing with it on custom scripts. But I think that it's so much stronger than Chef on a lot of custom scripts as a result, and it makes it less flexible because it's relating specifically to the demon as opposed to just evil in general.
I actually think it plays even worse with misregistration than the Chef does, but I do see your point. I'm happy with C tier for that one.
I agree it plays a little bit worse with misregistration, but I still like what it does with it.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, it is bottom line substantially worse than the Chef for script building purposes. Where is the king, actually? Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I think we can do the paired characters like King and Choirboy and Huntsman and Damsel.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. All right, let's talk about the King and the Choirboy then. Go ahead.
I think so. Starting with King, King is fairly flexible, maybe not the most flexible character. There are things that it can go wonky with, like if you're a king who sat next to a Nodashi and the Nodashi never learns you, and then they just like kill you out of nowhere, and maybe there's a Choirboy in the game. The Choirboy then gets to find out the demon. That feels pretty bad. It's a little bit less mitigated with a Vortox. Vortox learns a player who's definitely not the king. Technically speaking, every single night a storyteller could wake up a Vortox and tell them a different player who's not the king. Probably don't do that, but you could. But even if the king accidentally or the Vortox accidentally kills the king, the Choirboy gets misinformation, so it's not quite as bad. They're learning a player who's not the demon, which is still strong, but I don't know. I think it's probably like a B tier. It's fairly versatile. I'm not necessarily sure how much like interest it really adds to most scripts.
Yeah, I do want to echo Curb's point, which is that it's King and Choirboy almost have to be on the script together. Obviously, there are exceptions.
Most of the time, yeah.
But they almost have to be, and that takes up 2 spots rather than 1 spot on your script, which
it does, yeah.
Which makes it harder. Which makes it a little bit harder to build scripts around. That said, I don't think they have too many horrible interactions. There are some that are better than others, like you said. I'd be okay with a B. I would be okay with a C. I think. I don't think that. I mean, we could, if we wanted to, put King into B and Choirboy into C because you need to have, because it's kind of like on that edge for me, and you need to have a King. You don't necessarily need to have a Choirboy if you're going to do something silly with it like Jack did. But I think that would look even sillier than Jack's script, so I think I'll put them both into B.
Yeah, well, okay. I would put king into B, and I would put choir boy into D, because you can literally only put it on a script that has a king on.
That's an interesting take. We'll do that. Let's do it.
Like, I think that choir boy can be a very strong character if it goes off, but like in terms of script building, it literally can only go on scripts with king in it, which makes it incredibly constrained.
No, that's a fair point. But then, does that not weigh into the argument for king, which can almost only go into scripts with a choir boy in it?
Yeah, that's maybe fair. I'd be maybe willing to bump it down to a C. Yes, okay. Huntsman is going to get the same treatment. Don't worry, we'll get there when we get to Damsel, which is coming up.
It is. That doesn't mean that Damsel is, though, because...
No, the Damsel's not going there, but the Huntsman is.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Courtier, and we're back to BMR. I think it's me to open. So, Courtier almost cannot go on one demon script, unless that script is Leviathan, in which case it probably just about can. But even then, it's not the best. It almost cannot go onto a script without evil characters. The Jinx with the Vizier makes it a little bit less terrible there, although that Jinx, I know, is a bit confusing to some people. But I think it works for what they're trying to do with it, along with Preacher. But I do think that it is a script. It is a character that is quite hard to fit onto a lot of scripts. It can't really go onto a script where it's obvious what the demon is, because C above. Yeah. I think I'm curious. It's not a B. It's not an A, and it's not an S. I think it could be a C, because I don't think it's as bad as the Chambermaid, because I do think there are ways to build around it if you got a subtle evil team. And I think there are interesting things you can do with some outsiders, even. But I also don't think that you can't do things with it that you can't do with other characters. So I would be okay with a D, but I think it's C, personally.
My gut instinct is to put it in D, but I agree that you could potentially make a script where the evil team is subtle enough that you can get it into C, but I think it's so difficult to do that. I still want to put it in D. I'm sorry. Like you almost don't you don't want to put it with Cannibal, because then you get like, say, 2 uses of a Courtier. You don't want to put it on scripts that have less than 4 demons, because then they become like, they start having optimal choices to make. I've seen Courtier on a script that had a Cannibal plus only like 2 demons on it, and it's like, well, cool. So Courtier shoots their shot, and then if that doesn't work, they get executed, because they can find out immediately. They get executed for a Cannibal, and the Cannibal gets to do the other one, and it's like, it hard to put on customs.
Yeah, I think that on the custom script that it is on, it is great. But at the same time, I think about my custom scripts, and I'm like, do I ever really feel tempted to put a Courtier on it? And I don't. So, yeah, D tier it is. Cult Leader, you're up.
Cult Leader is an alignment flipper, so it kind of suffers the same thing as all other alignment changing characters. You need to be kind of careful and considerate about what else you are putting on the script, and how much that script might need, say, Spirit Ivory. You can get information from it if you're using it in a particular way, but let's be honest, most people don't use it that way. That's not the fault of the character, nor its impact on the script, though, so we're not necessarily considering that as much. Where would I put it? Probably like C2 would be. I think it can do some interesting things with alignment, like misregistration, maybe. If they're next to a recluse, you can never trust the cult leader, which is kind of funny to me.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said. It's not above B, and it's not a D. It absolutely does some really interesting things. I've done interesting things with a cult leader and a recluse, as the cult leader in that game, who was Iris, is very fond of reminding me. I don't know if you were, I think you were co-storytelling that game, I'm not certain. Basically, I just switched their alignment every night, and it was very funny. But there is something about the cult leader that just screams C, and I don't think it's the fact that it starts with the C. Even though chat do seem to be enjoying putting characters wherever in the tier that the letter that they start with. But yeah, I think I agree that it's high end of C, but I think it's C.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Damsel, and also Huntsman by extension. So should we just drop the Huntsman into D tier and be done with that one?
Yeah, D tier. Let's go.
Damsel is not weighed back by the Huntsman in the same way that the King is weighed back by the Choir Boy. You can do really interesting things with a Damsel. And I have, in my recent script building, have found that Damsel is going on so many scripts, and even with the characters that it just absolutely doesn't work with, it still somehow works with them. Like Spy. Damsel and Spy do not work together, but they work together on a script. And I am finding it very hard to make a justification for this not being S tier, but I want to hear what you think.
I don't have one. It's S tier.
Okay, there we go then. Do you want to explain why? Maybe you can do a better job than me.
It's a fairly hidden outsider. It has interesting interactions with things that might gain its ability somehow, like that cannibal. So they have to sometimes consider not coming out. They can also consider not coming out after they're dead anyway, just to see if they can get minions to guess a living player as a damsel and get a minion to out. It's an incredibly versatile character. I think maybe consider how many other like conditional game ending roles you're putting it with along with on a script. Like if you just had a script of outsiders of like Damsel Saint Klutz, like maybe reconsider. But in general, yeah, Damsel's just it can go anywhere you want.
This from the author of High Stakes Betting.
Well, High Stakes Betting is a little different. Okay, it's Riot. That's its own thing.
Okay. Yeah, Damsel is one of the best characters in the game from a script building perspective, without question.
Yeah.
Deus Ex Fiasco. Let me just real quick. This character is one of the best characters in the game. It is so good that it is no longer a character. So, there we go. Deus Ex Fiasco is uncharacter. Deviant. I like Deviant. It fits anywhere. And it's an interesting character. The only thing that is holding Deviant back from an S tier for me is that you cannot put it on a script with Little Monster at all.
Yes, but I still want to put it in S tier anyway.
Okay.
I also think that technically speaking, if you call for an exile immediately at the start of the day, which you can do, you can get an exile to happen before a deviant has a chance to be funny. So like that's not necessarily the funnest thing to do, but I have had to do it with a very obviously evil deviant. So I'm fine putting it in S tier.
Most storytellers give deviants a defense when they can be funny. But yeah, Deviant is a character that will make your games better. It is, and when your games are better, your script is better, or at least it looks better. So yeah, Deviant is almost the perfect traveler in my opinion. What do you think of the Devil's Advocate?
So kind of like the Assassin, it's adding in a somewhat unique kind of mechanical aspect to the game. Assassin adds extra kills, Deviant takes away executions or death by execution. So again, it constrains your scripts in a certain way. If you have a DA, you might need to think about like what else you could put that would make it easy for evil to bluff as something. So I'd probably put it kind of in the same tier. It's pretty strong. They got to get their timing right though. And yeah, in terms of what else is on the script, it almost like narrows your hand a little bit, but I don't think it's too difficult to kind of fit into many scripts. So I'd probably put it in B.
Yeah, B is 100% my natural inclination for basically everything that you just said. It does have some pretty obvious restrictions around it. I have been a devil's advocate in a game where no other character can survive execution, and it felt like I wasn't really doing anything unless I managed to survive the entire game and protect my demon, I suppose. So yeah, I don't think it can be higher than the B, but it is a nice simple character that has a lot of interesting things that it can do on the right script, so it is a B.
I think it's great when you're a DA to bluff as a professor.
Okay, go on.
No, that's just a comment to troll somebody.
Oh, okay, good to know. I'm going to guess Mullabot, but I don't need to know. The Djinn. Now, this is an interesting one because the gut instinct is it goes in NA because, like, it doesn't immediately do anything. But at the same time, it could also go in S because how many scripts don't have jinxes? So, how do we want to approach this one? Do we want to talk about the concept of jinxes and how important jinxes are to a script?
So the thing is that the Djinn is meant to go on the script if it has a jinx and not on the script if it doesn't. And you as a script writer don't actually have a choice in that. So I think as a result, it automatically goes into not applicable because you as a script writer do not technically have a choice. Although most people leave the Djinn off when there is a script that shows up because you just sort of like forget about it. That is technically how it works.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about the Doomsayer, and this is the first Fable that I think we actually can score, because Doomsayer is a character that you can build scripts around. For that reason, and because it is a character that has a real core to it that you can really build something around. I don't think it can be lower than a C. I don't think it can really be lower than a B. But it's so inflexible that I don't think it can be higher than a B either. So I think it's either a B or a C. I don't know if I say it can be lower than a B. Actually, I think it lands in C, but I would be okay with B. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that you can do interesting things with it. So, like, there are a couple of scripts that are well known that are designed actually around the Doomsayer. There's the Teensyville Race to the Bottom, and then there's a full size script called A Day to Remember. Jack did write a script. I forget what he called it, but it was the Leviathan Doomsayer with only a king but no choir boy on it.
It was called Lightning of the Leviathan's Lagoon.
Yeah. So, like, I think that you can definitely do some interesting things with it, but that's obviously not, it's actually intention. Its intention is if you are running out of time on a game and you need to get the game, like, to go faster. We've seen Tyler do something with it in legacy games. So I'd probably put it in like a C tier, that you can do interesting things with it, but I think you have to be very thoughtful about the design space that you're working in when you're building a script around the Doomsayer.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The Dreamer, go.
Dreamer pretty strong. I don't really know much what else to say. You can mitigate it somewhat by putting something like a spy or a widow on the script so that it's not automatically confirmed that the Dreamer is just the Dreamer to a bunch of people. Vortox helps it because it allows evil to more easily bluff it and be like, well, here's why I got misinformation. So you might want to include various sources of misinformation on a custom script with a Dreamer on it. I'd probably put it in like maybe a B to a C tier. I think it's quite strong, but not overly strong if you are paying attention to your script, but you do have to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I think that the Dreamer is a character that, like you say, very strong character, but it is one that you can quite easily build around. So I agree that it's a B tier. It's okay. Just looking at the number of characters that we've got left, we're probably going to have to end up splitting this one into two parts.
Yeah, I'm all right with that. We're an hour and a half in, and we're maybe halfway-ish through. So
we've done 40 characters so far. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Not half.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mullabot, what's 8 times 14 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? What's 8 times 14 plus 9, chat? That's about, it should be about a third of the way.
It's 121.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we are about a quarter of the way through the script, or through the characters. Do we want to go into 2 or into 3? I suppose that's the question.
I think we can cut it into 2. It's fine.
All right. So we are halfway through this episode of Script Note Special, which is going to be half of a Script Note Special by itself So I'm going to add a part 1 to the title of the stream really quick. Do you want to talk about the drunk while I do that?
Sure. I mean, the drunk thinks that they're townsfolk. Super fucking versatile. Can feel bad with certain types of things, like Sentinel with drunk is usually quite difficult for most people to stomach. It's not very palatable. Can fit with just about everything else, though. I know that there are some people who like don't particularly like, say, other plus ones like a Fengu with a drunk. But I don't know. It seems S tier to me. I think there's some interactions that are kind of a little bit iffier than others, but nothing that is so bad that it knocks it down for me. So I would say S tier.
Yeah, I think that the drunk is kind of the most
peak outsider.
Yeah, it's the most it's one of the most clock tower characters in the game, along with something like the I'd say the recluse or the imp. I think it's really hard to go wrong when script building with a drunk. Like you say, there are some things that aren't always the best. I think that on a script where the outsider count is only going to be nudged, and finding the outsider count is important, it might not be exactly what you want for that script, but even then, you can probably make it work. And yeah, it's an S tier character, of course it is. It's the drunk.
Yeah.
Speaking of the drunk, I'm going to go and get a drink. It's not alcohol. I don't drink alcohol. But we'll take a super quick. This is the halfway mark of the halfway mark. So we'll take a super
quarter
quick
mark.
Yeah, this is the quarter mark. We'll take a super quick 1-2 minute break right now while I go and get a drink. Be right back.
And I will sit here attempting to entertain chat, but I'm not very good at it when it's by myself because I am just a nervous little goose honking into the abyss. Yeah, so I do think, though, like, Piranha, you do have a kind of a point. Pit Hag's maybe not the best interaction for it. I think that Pit Hag's making a drunk is sort of like, it's the number one obvious play. And I think that storytellers lean into it maybe a little too much, right? So when a Pit Hag makes a drunk, you can do whatever with that in terms of like either telling them that they're a different townsfolk than they think they are, or like not telling them. Well, okay, to be fair, if they Pit Hag an outsider into a drunk, you have to tell them that their character has changed because they have to think that they're a townsfolk. If they Pit Hag a townsfolk into the drunk, then you can do whatever you want in terms of either telling them they've changed or not. And I'll be honest, I think I would like to see storytellers tell players a little more often that they've changed characters. But I also think that it's very dependent on what else is on the script, right? Like, I think we did that recently on a Connecticut stream where we told somebody that they became the snake charmer, but they were actually just turned into the drunk. So I think there are some roles that kind of facilitate that a little bit better because they're funnier. I do think it's awkward when you have a Pit Hag and a drunk, and so like technically you can Pit Hag a player into the role that the drunk thinks they are because that role's not technically in play, which is a little bit awkward, but you can get around it as the storyteller in whatever way you kind of want to.
I also did the thing that you just mentioned with the turning somebody into a snake charmer when they've been turned into the drunk on stream recently. Another thing that you can do that you probably don't regularly want to do, but that you can do, is tell a drunk that they've been turned into another townsfolk, even if they haven't.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Oh, okay. I was getting a drink, so I'm sorry if I missed that.
Yeah, I think that storytellers should tell people that they have changed characters a little bit more often.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You can do that with a Leviathan. Sorry, not a Leviathan, a Lunatic as well if you want. Just tell the Lunatic they've changed demon, just for fun.
Oh, wait, yeah. You're talking about somebody who is the drunk telling them that they've act when they haven't. Okay, yeah, I'm not as much into that one.
No, it's something you would very, very rarely want to do, but it is something that you can do. Anyway, I'm back. I've got a drink. I put a bottle of water in the freezer because it's really warm and I don't like it. So I now have very cold water. Duchess. Duchess is another Fable character that you can put onto a script. It adds a deceptive amount of information.
Yeah.
it's not a character that you can put into play without really thinking about it. You need to be aware of what you're doing when you add a Duchess into play and onto a script. It's a good one if you've got a low info script with active townsfolk that are all brimming to use their ability but don't know how.
I agree. Like if you read Duchess's like almanac entry, it is intended for scripts that are low information to no information. Like that's its intention. You should not be putting Duchess on scripts that already have information on it. Like in my opinion. So that really narrows where the Duchess can go in terms of like actual positive impact on a script that's not just gonna overpower. I also think that this is more on how to play the Duchess, and so not a script issue, but like evil players need to be a lot more proactive in visiting the Duchess, and if they're not, it's just gonna overrun them. So especially when you combine that with scripts that already have information, it's not fun a lot of the time.
So, but yeah, the question is this a C tier character on par with the Doomsayer, or is it a D tier character?
I put it in D. I think it has much more narrow constraints than a Doomsayer in terms of what scripts it actually is good on.
I agree. Although not for the same reason. I think that you really need to build a script around either of those two. But I think that a script built around a Duchess is probably less likely to be interesting than one built around a Doomsayer.
Yeah, I think so. I can agree with that.
All right, Empath. Empath is a weird one because it looks like it's just a nice little bit of information, but if you don't have characters that can mess with it in the medium to long term, it's going to get such powerful information over the course of the game. So I think Empath is a character that almost has to be paired with ideally a spy and a recluse, or a Vortox to get the most out of its ability as a script builder.
I think there's some other ways around it too, but in general, I can agree. I'd probably put it in B.
No Dashi works as well, and aside from a No Dashi, you probably want a mobile demon as well.
Yeah, mobile demons would certainly be helpful. Yeah, I'd put it in B.
Yeah, I was looking at B into C, but I'm happy with B. How do you feel about the engineer? I think I know exactly what I want to do with the engineer, but what do you think?
Engineer needs a script very, very carefully crafted. I think it's very easy to give the engineer optimal plays to make, and that those optimal plays are often not fun. So I think it's very difficult to make a script that is like, you need to give difficult choices to the engineer, right? So that they're not just, oh, cool, well, I'm just going to do the most obvious thing with my ability. But also, if you make it too difficult for them and they're like, well, everything here fucking sucks and I don't want to do anything, like, that also feels bad. So finding that balance, extremely difficult, D tier.
Yeah, exactly. When it works, but it very rarely works. I think that this is one that, again, it could go up in the future, depending on what other characters get released and when. But I don't think it's ever going to be higher than the C, whereas I think the Alchemist could make it maybe into an A. But right now, Engineer is a hard D tier.
Yeah.
I suppose you should kick off the discussion about the Evil Twin.
Why?
All right. I'll kick off the discussion about the Evil Twin so you can sort of mentally prepare yourself. I know that you don't like it as a character, but I don't think it's that bad for script building. I think that there are cases where it can be, it can have some poor interactions, but I think that most of the reasons that you don't like it as a character are innate to the character and can neither be fixed nor harmed by script building. I think that the Evil Twin is rarely likely to make things more interesting, although I think it's one of the few minions that does work at least okay with an alchemist, so there is that. But I also don't think that the Evil Twin can't fit into most scripts. Obviously, there's a question of whether you want it to fit into most scripts, and you obviously don't. But I think it's a B tier character.
I think you're right about everything you said, and I just didn't want to say it because I don't ever want to say anything good about twins because I hate it.
So it's a B tier character, is what we're saying.
Honestly, in terms of script building, I'd probably even say it could go into A tier, and I don't want to say that, but I have to.
You heard it here first. I was trying to spare Navian, but no. Evil Twin is one of the best characters in the game. You should put it in all of your scripts. Exorcist.
I have integrity. Okay, I'm not gonna lie about how I think a versatile character is just because I think it fucking sucks.
I think that the things holding the Evil Twin back are kind of the potential for information that it gives the good team. And there are plenty of ways around an Evil Twin with certain characters, like a lycanthrope or a golem or some types of alchemist or anything on the good team that can hard solve it, like a gossip, and also prove that they're hard solving it, like a gossip. I think that they can hold the Evil Twin back a little bit in terms of script design. It's certainly not an S tier character from a script design perspective, but it's certainly not lower than a B. A and B, I think, both make sense.
I think that a lot of times, Exorcist can be too strong. It needs to be like you almost need a Puka with an Exorcist in order to have some of that ambiguity of like, or you need it with other roles that can kill at night to have that ambiguity of, well, the Exorcist chose this person, but then the death still happened, so are they actually the demon or not? Like, I think that it's pretty constrained about where, like, what it can do without just being like overly strong. So I'd probably put it more like C through D.
Just to be clear, what I was just saying was the Evil Twin, not the Exorcist.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, the Evil Twin as a character has problems with characters that can like just kill one of the twins. Is what I was saying, or confirm.
Oh yeah.
Or
absolutely.
confirm that there is twins in play. Sorry, or confirm which of the twins is evil.
Yeah, absolutely works poorly with those.
Yeah, so it's never going to be S tier, but it's never going to be below B tier. So, yeah. Exorcist, you've already said your piece on the Exorcist that it's C or D tier.
Yeah, because I'm apparently like 12 steps ahead in my brain.
But you're absolutely spot on. The Exorcist is a character that is tricky to script build around. You can also do it with characters that don't cause deaths in the night. You can do it with, like the Exorcist is severely weakened by an innkeeper or a zombie and so on. And also by, as you say, other characters that can cause deaths. And the Puka, obviously, which messes with it. And it's completely taken out of the game by, for example, a Leviathan. It's just not a factor.
Yeah.
Are they jinxed? I don't know if they're jinxed. I don't think they are. They should be.
No, let's not make more terrible Leviathan jinxes, please.
This one wouldn't be a terrible Leviathan jinx. This one would be the Exorcist and the Leviathan cannot be in play together.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, I think that the Exorcist can do its job on custom scripts that it does on BMR better than most BMR characters, but only if you build script carefully around them. Is that C tier?
Yeah.
Is that D tier? I lean towards C tier.
Yeah, I'm all right with a low C for it.
Yeah. Okay, Fangu. Fangu is an interesting one, I think, because it's a very powerful character. You do need to be, like, up until now we've been saying, oh, it's got a potential to turn a character evil that puts it at a cap. And I think that is true. It's hard to build a script with too many characters that can turn evil. I think that the Fangu is less bad than other characters that turn characters evil, because whereas the Mezephiles or the Bounty Hunter tend to turn townsfolk, the Fangu replaces an outsider, but it is an outsider that it adds. But it also does have that sort of natural flaw because it adds an outsider, and that's innately useful to script building. I think it's B tier, but I can see an argument for A. What do you think?
I would put it in A tier. It does add, it's causes an extra evil player in the game, so something to always be cautious of when it comes to other alignment changing abilities. But, you know, in general, it's extremely flexible and versatile outside of that. So yeah, for me, it's an A.
It doesn't work in terms of outsiders because it's an outsider-focused character. It doesn't work the best with the goon. It's not even aside from the +2 outside to evil players. People
difficult to jump to. Yes.
Yeah, people debate how it is with the lunatic. I personally think it's fine.
The Fangunatic, yeah, there's split opinions on that. I think it's middling.
It's a bit weird with, and also middling with Golem, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Shrug.
Yeah.
The thing about Fengu on a script is that it incentivizes all outsiders to at least initially be quiet about the fact that they're an outsider. So Golem can just choose to like not claim Golem and not nominate. And then Town at the end of the game can meta, well, did they jump to the confirmed outsider or not, kind of thing. So yeah, I still think it's an A tier. There's a few somewhat like kind of weird interactions, but nothing that's bad enough to knock it down even further for me.
I think you made a really good point. In terms of it makes outsiders want to stay quiet, because that in itself kind of opens the door up to other characters. Like, you can have 4 pretty happy to claim outsiders, which is normally a bad case for the Baron. But then you can put Baron might be a bad example because the Baron in a base 2 outsider game with 4 outsiders on the script only gets to add 1. So I don't know.
It's fine. They're trading that extra addition for the fact that they're going to get an extra evil player. I think that's fine.
Yeah. All right. You've sold me. Farmer, go ahead.
S tier.
Yeah.
I mean, what does it work poorly with? Like, not very much. I think if the only poisoning that you have on the script is, say, coming from a Nodashi and a farmer dies and nobody claims farmer, well, then maybe they're looking at their neighbors. Maybe don't do that. But, like, in general, farmer is incredibly versatile on scripts. There's not much that it can go wrong with. It gets around misinformation like Vortox. So, because it's a mechanical thing. Like, I love it.
Another character that it works poorly with is Lycanthrope.
That's true, but you can always just turn the Lycanthrope into the farmer and stop the chain. There you go. Easy, simple.
You can, but it's still extra confirmation. But yeah, it's not horrible, but it's not great. It doesn't work with demons that don't kill or characters that don't kill. It works middling with demons that don't choose their kill, like Little Monster, and in particular Legion, same as other characters that want to die in the night. I think it's A tier, just because it does have a fair number of things that it doesn't work great with, and only a couple of things that it really does work brilliantly with. So I think it's A tier, but should we throw this one to chat?
Sure, if you'd like. I still think it's S tier. Like, I think that almost anything that it can cause an issue with, the storyteller can sort of mitigate by where they choose to put the farmer.
I mean, sorry, what do you mean? Where you choose to put it after the first farmer?
Yeah, after the straw pass. So the Lycanthrope kills the farmer, you make the Lycanthrope the farmer. There you go. You've stopped the chain, and it's no longer an issue. Okay.
All right, what do you think, chat? Let us know.
I agree. Farmer potentially bad with Nodashi, but also if your evil team either has the ability to know where that farmer is, or you are able to you get the claims from your neighbors before you start, your townsfolk neighbors before you as a Nodashi start killing it, you can pick the bluff up, right?
I actually think that characters that want to die at night are interesting with Widow and Spy, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Ravenkeeper and Spy are on the same script.
I agree. I mean, like I said in chat, Ravenkeeper and Spy are on the same script, and sometimes your hint that there is a spy in play, or your ability to believe that the player who saw the Widow is good, is affected by the fact that you aren't dying.
Yeah. And if you can get trust as a Ravenkeeper, that gives the evil team a really tricky choice.
Yeah.
Okay, well, chat think it's an S tier character, so it's going into S tier.
Yeah, Pharma has interesting interactions with Pit Hag or Vigos, for
It
example.
absolutely does.
I agree with that. Yeah, or other demons that can die at night, like a Fengu or like an Imp.
Absolutely.
Or Legion.
All right, Fearmonger. I don't know what to do with Fearmonger. I think Fearmonger is my evil twin, in that it's a character that I don't really like, but I do think it's a decent character to script build with. I don't think it's got a lot that it does poorly in terms of interactions. I can see that I can see issues with it with characters like the Organ Grinder. It can be a little bit strong, although I think that's overplayed a little bit as well. To be honest, I think it's fine. But yeah, I don't really have too many huge criticisms of it, which is annoying. How do you feel about it?
I really like Fearmonger both as a role and for script building. I think it's very versatile.
So where would you put it?
To be honest, I'd probably put it S tier, like maybe A tier.
I'm gonna latch onto that maybe A tier. No. Okay, I'm gonna. What bad things can you do with a Fearmonger? Yeah, I can't think of anything. I suppose it's an S tier character.
Yeah. Molly thinks it's too generic for S tier. I don't think it is. I think its role in the game is to cause high levels of paranoia.
No, Molly is right. We can't have generic characters in S tier. But Butler is going down to A.
Yeah, Molly, if you want to make that argument.
Fibbin. We recently did a Fibbin script competition, and I think that gives us some insight. How do you find that one? How does that weigh into our thoughts?
I think that it's quite difficult to build a script for. I think it makes for some really interesting scripts when you do it well, but I also think that it is quite difficult to actually build a script for. So the question is, like, if we're comparing it to maybe some of those other fabled, like the Duchess and the Doomsayer, like, where does it fall for there? I personally would probably put it in like a low C, but I could also be okay with putting it into a D because I do think that it's not easy to do it well.
Yeah, I was leaning into a C because I think that some of the scripts that we built and we saw were good scripts that really proved the point that it can be a C, but there were also some issues that we saw with people who are really trying to nail down the Fibbin as a character that keep it any higher than a low C. But I do think it's got enough about it to make its way into that low C. I think that it's an important tool for script builders to have in the pocket if they need it.
Yeah, I agree.
Fibbin is not applicable.
You mean Fiddler?
I do indeed mean Fiddler. Yeah, that's our next script contest. Build as a Fiddler script. Build as a script that will play for 2 days and then ending.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Fisherman. Now that we've got over the confusion of how Fisherman works with the Vortox, I think that the Fisherman is another character like the Amnesiac that really depends on what you plan on doing with it as a storyteller. I think that it's another thing that you can really sort of plan ahead with. And I think because of that, I think it is a natural fit with the Amnesiac, which I thought was an S tier character, but we decided between us was an A tier character.
I think that I would rather put Fisherman in S tier. I actually think that it is more versatile than the Amni.
Well, I'm happy with that because I think it's an S tier character. I think they're both S tier characters, so into S it goes. But go ahead. Is there anything else you want to say about Fisherman?
Not hugely. Like, I do agree that it's very storyteller dependent. I mean, like the other roles that are storyteller dependent, it's its own individual strength and depends on the storyteller, but that's not to do with the script that it's on necessarily. I think that it plays a little bit easier with things like Vortox. Like, yes, it is Vortoxable information, but I think that feels worse with Amni than it does with Fisherman, because Fisherman is still a little bit more straightforward. You at least know what your ability is.
Okay, no, that's fair. I do think that Vortox is absolutely Amnesiac's Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Flower Girl. Yeah, it's you to lead for Flower Girl.
Easy to fit on just about any script, but needs some form of like misinformation / Vortox. Otherwise, it becomes too strong. So that really kind of knocks it back. I'd probably put it into like B to C tier.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much all of that. I think that it kind of has to be Vortox, maybe a Nodashi that's going to be messing with it, because like what else is going to mess with it? The people know that I hate Recluse and Flower Girl, and I'm not likely to change that anytime soon. I think it's B tier because it does.
Yeah.
When it works, it's such a natural and wonderful pair for the Vortox. And I don't think you need a Vortox. I think there are other ways that you can do it, particularly considering that people ignore the Flower Girl anyway, so it's not as powerful as it probably should be. But yeah. The Fool. I think that the Fool is a B tier character for the exact same reasons as the DA is. It's for scripts that have surviving execution as a mechanic, it's a really neat little, quite easy to add character. But for any script that doesn't have that, it's not going to work. So I think that it's a pretty clear B tier.
I agree.
Okay. How do you feel about the Fortune Teller? I think I know where I want to put Fortune Teller, but how do you feel about it?
I think so. If you think about what is on Fortune Teller's home script, it's got Drunk, Poisoner, Recluse, and its own Red Herring. And when you take those things away from it, it gets significantly. I mean, the Red Herring's never going to be taken away from it, but like the other things, it's significantly stronger. It can be nerfed a little bit by demons that move around. So, for example, the Imp, where is its home script, the Fengu, the Lil Monster is really nerfs it. So, yeah, I think it's a little too strong on a lot of custom scripts that don't have the things that sort of mitigate some of the strength level of it. So, I want to put it into A tier, but I think I'd probably be okay with it. And technically, like that might just be my bias of how much I like the character. So I think it probably more reasonably belongs in a B tier.
So here's my question for the Fortune Teller. Let's compare it to the Empath. They both have the same home script. They both have everything else going on around it. How does the Fortune Teller compare to the Empath in terms of script building? I think that it's better than the Empath without the Recluse and the Spy. Or, well, the Spy doesn't affect it at all, so it's less significant to the to TB than the Empath is. So I think it's a little bit more versatile in that field. But it's a little bit less versatile in that the Empath is more easily countered by the Vortox, whereas the Fortune Teller can probably figure that out in a couple of days. But that also makes the Fortune Teller an interesting day 3 Vortox check. So I think that the Fortune Teller is not a lot more, but enough more versatile than the Empath to put it into A tier.
Sure. I can agree with that.
All right, the Gambler. I think the Gambler is the most versatile extra death character in Blood on the Clocktower. It's never going to be too powerful. Yeah, it's never going to be too powerful because it's probably going to confirm that somebody is probably on the evil team. Like as a flaw, on a good script, they could be the Drunk, they could be the Goon. Well, maybe not the Goon because then they survive. They could be the Lunatic. They could be a Recluse, but probably don't gamble a Recluse. There's another obvious character that I'm forgetting. But it always comes at the cost of its own life. So I think that the absolute flaw for the Gambler is B tier, because that's why we put the Assassin. Mm-hmm. But I think its absolute ceiling is A tier, because it can't be S tier because it really requires a script to be built for it. So the question is it
Yeah.
B or is it A? I think it is enough more versatile than the assassin to be an A tier character.
I feel like it's a B tier.
I'm okay with that. I think I would still go on. Give me your thoughts. Why is it B tier and not A tier?
I don't think that it's necessarily more versatile than, say, the assassin. I don't really know. I don't really have much more to comment other than I don't think it's actually that much more versatile. I think I agree that it's one of the more versatile characters of Extra Death. Of the good roles that can cause it, it's certainly the most versatile, but it doesn't really feel too much more versatile to me.
I think it is because of the assassins. The assassin, to be on a script well placed, needs to be able to take use of the second prophet's ability, like I said when we were talking about the assassin. But I don't feel strongly enough to fight for it, so it's right on the cusp for me. B tier it is. How do you feel about?
I can agree that it's like a high B.
Yeah, I do think it's above assassin. Whether it's enough above assassin to be an A tier, chat clearly feel it's B tier as well, so I'm fine with that. Gangster.
Plays awkwardly with roles that can't die during the day. So that means that it's not an S tier for me. So other than that, I think it can go into quite a lot of scripts. So yeah, I'd probably put it into A.
I think it plays awkwardly with characters that can't die. I also think it plays a little bit awkwardly if the demon is static and is right next to it.
Yeah, but then you can just make them evil, right? Like,
yeah, I suppose that's true. I'm still leaning a little bit towards the B, but I don't know. What do you think, chat? I think
chat, keep in mind, I think we've had some people join. Keep in mind, we are rating these based on how well they can be put on a script, not how much you like them or how much power they have as a character or whatever. We're looking at script design as our criteria.
Right. I'll go over our two axes that we're talking about for the most part. We're looking at characters that will fit onto any script, and we're looking at characters that have interesting interactions and can have scripts be built around them. So the gangster, how well does it fit onto any script? I think that the problem with saying just make it evil is that travelers should be good more often than they're evil. Obviously, that shouldn't be all the time, but if you've got that thing that's saying, well, if in this case they're going to be evil more than they're good, I think that kind of works against how travelers should be. So
there's only two spots that a gangster can sit that's going to put them immediately next to a demon, right? So just most of the time they're not going to be sat immediately next to the demon. That it's very simple to just not have that happen. So I think most of the time you can make a gangster good and it's fine.
I think it's close between A and B. I'm going to throw this one.
I think literally the only thing that it doesn't work with for me is things that can survive during the day and wouldn't die to a gangster, and therefore it has to be A because of that high level of versatility. Mm-hmm. Like how you feel about killing travelers in general, I think doesn't come into play here. Lots of people don't like them, and I think that's fair, but that doesn't come into play with how well that can be just thrown into pretty much anything. I think you can get thrown into pretty much anything and be fine.
Yeah, I want to throw this one to chat, but I do also agree that it is important that we're judging these on the right characters. I'll think about it. And come back to you. I'll leave it not ranked for the moment. General. I think that the general is wacky with Vortox, considering particularly if you're a 5-star general sort of storyteller. Because if you think that good is slightly winning, can you say that good is strongly winning? So it's a little bit wacky in that case. Vortox is once again a problematic scrunkly. But other than that, I think that General is a character that gives some really interesting info, has some fairly cool interactions, and fits anywhere. So I think it's low S.
Yep, I can agree with that.
Cool. Goblin, what do you think?
S.
I don't think it is.
Why not?
I think Goblin has too many issues with characters that can remove its ability, like Preacher, and characters that can look at confirming whether someone's a minion, like even the Investigator or the potentially the Artist. I think it's not too bad with an Artist, or maybe even a Gossip on the wrong script, or and I also think it's and so on. And I also think it's not necessarily the best. And obviously, it's also pretty bad, in my opinion, with a Golem. It's not as bad as other minions can be with a Golem, but I still think it's pretty rough. I think that there are plenty of scripts that I've seen with a Goblin on them and gone, that Goblin doesn't fit there. So I don't think it's bad, but I think it's B into A, probably A.
I disagree. I think that all of those roles that you named work fine with it because evil can bluff those things, with the exception of Gossip, and that's it. Like I've seen a Goblin win because evil bluffed that they preached a Goblin when they didn't. Like, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm the artist who asked if this player was a Goblin, and blah blah blah. And even if a Preacher does hit a Goblin and the Goblin just dies without getting their win, that feels bad for the Goblin, sure, but also it throws off the like players solving what is in the game, right? It means, oh great, we think that this player is probably not the Goblin. Well, I guess a Preacher would come out and say that's what they did, but like, there's every world where the player who claimed Goblin and died without a win is just not the Goblin. They were something else bluffing.
I think Goblin is better with. So I think the strength of the Goblin is that it's a hiding spot for the demon, and I think that characters on the good team that can differentiate demons from minions severely and very severely diminish the strength of the Goblin. So I think it needs to be on a script where it's not going to be overwhelmed with info. I think it's quite a social character. So I don't think that the Goblin fits on every or even most scripts, which is why I favor.
I can put it in an A tier because, Molobox also pointed out that, like, I've seen a demon try to claim Goblin when the minion types were already solved. If you have too many other minions that are essentially like too loud and not bluffable, then it takes away that bluffing space for evil. So you maybe do want to pay a little bit more attention to like the composition of the other minions and how loud they are as a result. So yeah, I'll knock it down to A.
All right, we've got a trade. Goblin A, Gangster in S, because fine. I take your points on Gangster. How do you feel about?
I wanted Gangster in A.
Sorry, I don't know why I put that in S. In A. I take your points on Gangster. It is, it's versatile. I do still have issues with it, but I think that A is those two both being an A is pretty reasonable compromise for us.
I think so.
Godfather, I think you're up.
I'd probably put it in B tier. It has the outsider manipulation, which is useful, but it also adds an extra kill, which makes it harder to like kind of script build around. So I'd probably put it in like a B tier.
Yeah, I think that people are saying that it should be a C tier because it's on the wrong scripts too often, and I do take that point. But I think that Godfather is the most B tier character we've had in a while, except for maybe Fool. It's another character that can cause additional deaths, so it probably doesn't want to be too far above B tier. I do think that there are ways that it can have that additional death and be the only character on the script that causes that additional death, if that death comes at an appropriate time and people are expecting it anyway. Like, I think that it can work to have
evil can bury it if they want most of the time, but
I think it can work to have a naked Godfather if you've got a really good script for it, but most of the time it won't. However, That +1 outsider is also, so I think it's capped there at B. That +1 outsider also, I think, sets the B as the floor, or +1/-1 outsider also kind of sets B as a floor, maybe C as a floor, because I think that is a really useful script building tool. And if you're careful with how you do it, and that's why it's not any higher than the B, it's a really useful character. I think this is the most B character we've seen in a while.
Yeah, I do think that there are some outsiders that it does work awkwardly with. Like,
For sure.
Drunk is a big one for sure. Like, if there's a drunk on the script and you're a Godfather and you get a kill and this player was claiming a townsfolk, like, do you kill somebody and confirm that they were the drunk? Was that just a bluff on their part? Like, I think that Drunk with Godfather in particular can be like a little bit tricky. But other than that, yeah, I think it's just pretty solidly in the B tier.
You also need to be careful to. There are also some characters.
Saints is one it works awkward with because the Saints just like never going to die during the day, really.
Yeah. I do think. Yeah, I think the conclusion is that it's a B tier character.
Yeah.
Golem. You need to be very careful with the Golem to not make it a townsfolk. So I don't think it can go above a C, but I do think it reaches a C.
Yeah.
I think it's.
I mean, I don't know. So I was the demon in the Golem reveal game, and what ended up happening was one of my minions was killed by the Golem, and then the other minion was executed in the same day. So, like, it's not great.
That game was trouble brewing with a Golem.
Yeah, it was.
Which you shouldn't play.
No, you shouldn't.
Again, we're not discussing it as a character. I think that we're discussing it in terms of its position as a script builder, and I do think that it's absolutely hard capped at C. But I don't think it's as bad as any of the characters that we've got in D. I think that if you're careful and you don't make it a townsfolk, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of right on the cusp of like D and C. I think it's maybe slightly more versatile than Acrobat, I guess.
You don't sound happy, but
no, I'm not happy about it. But I do think it's probably C.
We're putting it in C. Let's talk about the Goon then. You like the Goon more, but
that's true.
But yeah, where's Goon going for you?
It's an alignment flipper, so once again, you got to be very careful with what else you put on your script with that. It causes drunkenness, so you also need to be paying attention to what roles can choose it on both the good and the evil team. In terms of script building, I think it's less versatile than some of our other alignment flippers. So I would probably put Goon in like a C tier. There's definitely some roles that it works really, really awkwardly with. Like we brought up Alhad with it earlier. That's a fucking terrible interaction, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was thinking B into C, C into B, between those two. I do think that it has enough. Like let's think about the characters that we've already spoken about. How many times have we said it doesn't work with the Goon? I think enough to make it a C on the C end of that list.
Yeah.
The Gossip. This is a tricky one.
Gossip.
It's not higher than the C for me. It's too easily confirmed. But I think when it's done well, it works. So I do think it is a C.
Yeah, I think some of it is like self-mitigating, right? Like if the Gossip is on a script and it's too strong there, but you put it in play anyway, and you recognize that they're just too strong and too confirmation, you could like kill a Gossip immediately, which yes, still confirms them in their information, but at least they won't continue doing it. So I'd probably put it. I could be convinced that it goes into a D tier or a C tier, kind of in between those.
I think C, because I think that when it works, it's really interesting. It's it can obviously we're not judging it as a character, but it can play nicely with other characters because it can sort of back up other characters whilst being covered by other characters. Like there's plenty of evil characters that can be put on scripts with it to mess with it. Again, I look at those D tier characters and I think that Gossip is a step above them. I think it's C tier.
Yeah.
Speaking of C tier, the grandmother. I think pretty much everything I've just said about Gossip applies to the grandmother for the most part. I think it's better than Gossip, but I don't think it's as good as Gambler. I think it's tricky to script build with, but I don't think it's as tricky to script build with as the Gossip is. So I could be tempted by a B, but considering how low in the C the Gossip is, I think it's C.
Yeah, I'm fine with C tier there.
All right. How far are we into this? But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah, I'll count. You talk about the Gunslinger.
Sure. So Gunslinger is another one where I think because it's a killing traveler, people are going to be quite influenced by how they feel about killing travelers as opposed to how versatile they are on a script. There's also a lot of people who really dislike the Gunslinger Saint interaction, even though that is on its home script there. Which, some people even like house rule around it. I personally don't, but I understand why people feel that way. I think in terms of versatility, though, I mean, again, it works kind of weirdly with things that can't die during the day. So I would probably just put it in the same spot as Gangster is. It's yeah.
Yeah, I think some of the defenses that you made for Gangster with immobile demons don't really apply to the Gunslinger, but other defenses do. So I think it's got to go with the Gangster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon we got time for about 10. We've done 64. Well, 65 now. We've got about 80 to get through. So if we do another half a dozen,
okay,
then we'll hit. Is that how maths works? I don't know. Someone in chat tell me how many we need to do and tell us to stop when we're halfway there. Okay, let's talk about the Harlot for a moment. So the Harlot is an interesting one in that it causes extra deaths during the night, but it's not on the script naturally that does that. So it's clearly not intended to be hidden in that sense. It's clearly intended to be a confirmation character. It gains info, but at the cost of potentially two good players, most likely at least one good player dying to get that info. I think it works best with characters that don't want to die for that reason.
So I can agree with that.
I don't think it's a character that you can throw into any script, but at the same time, I think it's a character that you can throw into a lot of scripts. So I think it's B into A into B. I'd be fine with either of those if you have a strong preference between there.
Yeah, I'd probably put it in I kind of want to put it in C tier, but okay. I think it's probably more versatile than what I'm giving it credit for. So I think B is a good spot for it.
Okay, I'm fine with B. Now the tier list has grown too far that we can no longer see all of the tier lists. And the next row of characters. There we go. Okay, that's the best we can do. Hell's Librarian. How do you feel about a Hell's Librarian script, Avian?
I don't. I think it's not applicable.
How do you feel about the Heretic? This is controversial.
Okay, so in terms of its versatility, I personally think that Heretic should not be particularly hard confirmable by either team. I think that situationally it is okay every once in a while to have something like a librarian see it or a dreamer on the script who can dream them or whatever. But I think if you have scripts that are highly confirming of other players, you're sort of messing up the point of the Heretic, and you're just almost turning it into townsfolk there. If the good, like all of the good team can just confirm it and work together to keep it quiet. But I kind of agree with Mullibok. It's best as a pure social character, and as a result, it's not nearly as versatile as it actually like seems on first look. And you kind of need a script that's built around it. But I also think that if you're building a heretic script, something that like a lot of people are inclined to do is, oh, cool, I have a heretic here who's going to flip win-loss conditions, so let's just throw it on with like all of the win-loss condition characters that I can find. And I think that that's actually not as fun or interesting as it appears to be when you first think about it. So I'd probably put heretic into like C, maybe D.
I think heretic belongs in C. I think that, again, it's important to remember that we're not judging it how much we like it. I think that things that the heretic does are interesting, and I think that there are things it can do with other characters that are also occasionally interesting. I think that it is a character that requires very careful script building, so I can understand people who want to put it into the D tier. And I think that another trap that script builders might fall into is to, as you say, it needs to be an outsider, but it needs to be an outsider in the sense that, generally speaking, it needs to give the evil team some kind of agency. I think that the heretic should be paired. It shouldn't necessarily be the easiest thing in the world for the evil team to decide, oh, it's a heretic game, we're going to end the game today, but I think it should be possible. So I think it pairs pretty well with better with demons that can kill themselves at night than demons that can't. Or at the very least, demons that have some way to win the game if they figure out there's a heretic in play.
Yeah.
I do think it's a C tier character, but I do think it's a low C tier character. And again, I don't blame people who think that it's a character that you really, really, really need to build a script around, because it is. But I think it's a character that doesn't break things when it's on the script, except maybe the enjoyment of the players if it's on a really bad script. But I think that's where it lands into C.
Yeah, I'm fine with it being in C tier.
All right, should we put the imp into S and move on?
Yes.
Okay. Innkeeper. I suppose we should probably talk about the imp for a little bit. Why is the imp so good as for script builders?
So of the demons, it's probably got just the easiest and most straightforward ability. Yeah, you don't have to worry about like weird interactions with things like poisoning or misinformation coming from it, because it doesn't have that. Very simple, very straightforward. Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. There are some minions that maybe it's not always going to be the best with, but even then, usually there's some counterplay that can be, or interesting play that can be got from that. Like a public minion stops using their public ability. Are they now
right? Did they catch a star pass, or are they bluffing that they caught a star pass?
Right. And that's where it becomes interesting again. I don't think there's any problems with the imp in terms of script building. I cannot remember the last time I've gone, no, an imp doesn't fit on this script.
That's because it's happened never.
All right, Innkeeper. I think that the Innkeeper is one of the more versatile BMR characters.
I definitely agree with that.
I don't think it's very versatile. I don't think it's ever going to be above a B, but it's definitely not below a C. So I think we're looking in that BC range. It doesn't play nice with demons that have a one kill pattern all the time, because it can be like it's twice as good at protecting people from the demon as the monk is. I think it plays best when it can save people from causes other than the demon.
Yeah.
And I think it plays best when its drunkenness can really do something. So I think it plays best with either characters that can't confirm that they were drunk or poisoned, but characters that have a real downside to being drunk or poisoned. So I think it still has some serious limitations when it comes to script building with it. Does it have enough to get into B? Maybe. What do you think?
I would put it into B. I think that I agree. Like, if all of your demons are just single kill demons, it's definitely a little bit rough on those demons. So I tend not to put it with only single kills. I think that the drunkening that can come from it is, that's the trade off for it being able to save 2 people every night. That just depends on like how well that works with information versus mechanical roles. Just depends on how good the storyteller is with giving misinformation to drunk roles, which is more to do with the storyteller rather than the script building. So I think it's one of, if not, definitely one of the more versatile roles out of BMR, if not the most versatile role out of BMR. Like, I think it's a pretty high B for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. B it is. Let's talk about the investigator then. How do you feel about the investigator? I think that this is another one that I'm curious to hear what you think, because I'm not really sure where I land on this one.
I think that investigator is difficult to put on custom scripts. It's not really all that flexible. It's not really amazing with like really loud outed minions. I think it's got an interesting jinx with Vizier at least, but that's about it. I'd probably put it into C tier.
I was leaning B. I think that it does have some interesting play with a lot of characters off script. I think that showing the investigator the Mephiles can be really interesting, because it gives that investigator the interesting choice of basically just trying to blackmail the 2 people that they saw and be like, hey, you're the Mephiles, because hey. Or they can use their ability as a townsfolk and go and try and restrict the evil team's ability to recruit. So I think that's a sort of semi-public minion that it plays pretty interestingly with. I think that obviously it's kind of tied to the recluse. It's hard to build a script with the investigator that doesn't have a recluse on it. Or I was going to say Aura of Vortox, but I feel like unless you got some way to confirm that it's a Vortox, and even then, generally speaking, an investigator in a Vortox game probably isn't too happy, because they've just seen 2 people that aren't a particular minion, which is a little bit underwhelming. So, yeah, I did want it to be in B, but the more I talk, the more I'm feeling it's slightly more C-ward bound.
Yeah, I think it's a C.
Yeah, okay. The judge. I think that the judge is... I don't know if it's the hardest traveler to put onto a script, but I think it's the hardest traveler to put onto a script. It's like, it doesn't work with at least one character.
You put investigator into B instead of C.
Sorry. I don't know why I did that. Judge doesn't work with at least one character on all of the base 3 scripts. It doesn't work with Saint. It doesn't work with Evil Twin. It doesn't really work with Mastermind. It works the least bad with Mastermind.
Yeah, I agree.
But like, that's 3 characters right off the bat that the judge doesn't work with. So I don't think it can go any higher than a C. But when it works, it's not terrible. There are some fun things it can do, particularly it can be the sort of demon's last line of defense, whether that's a mobile demon or not. So I think it works pretty interestingly with demons like the Imp and the Fangu that can get themselves out of trouble at the cost of itself, and give the good team quite a bit of information to for the benefit of not immediately losing. Or it can bluff that if it's an evil judge. Of course, it can be like, no, actually, I want you to think that player is evil for the rest of the game. Have fun. I think there's a lot less benefit for a good judge using the execution doesn't carry ability in general, but there's probably some cases where it's worth it if they really trust a Saint claim or something like that the rest of town have decided is on the evil team, or if there's been some kind of evil rise up against a Saint. So I think the judge has enough interesting interactions to keep it from from the D tier. So the question then, is it C or is it B? I'm leaning towards C, but I could be persuaded.
Yeah, I think it's a C is fine. There's a lot of roles even outside of the base that it doesn't really work great with, like Goblin, for example,
sure.
with an Evil Judge, or Fearmonger with an Evil Judge. So I think there's a lot of limitations that it can have with its ability, that more so than other travelers.
Yeah. Cool. How do you feel about the Juggler?
Yeah, fairly versatile. Obviously, it requires some amount of misinformation in order to work. Otherwise they're just stupidly powerful. But generally very versatile. So yeah, probably like an
A. Yeah, I don't think it takes as much misinformation as other characters do. I think that the Juggler is a neat little bit of info to just drop onto a script. So I think it really benefits from the can be put in most scripts side, whilst not being as high on a script built around it is particularly interesting. So I think it's a low A, high B. So I think that our crossover there is A.
Yeah.
And how far have we got into this now? Talk about the Klutz for a bit while I count again.
So Klutz is a potential game ender. How interesting it ends up playing. Yes, she baby. How interesting Klutz plays with things like misregistration from Recluse or Spy is probably a bit of individual opinion. In general, yeah, I mean, I guess don't pick an outed Recluse, and if they pick a Spy, then let evil win. Otherwise, that probably feels bad. But mostly, I think it can fit onto pretty much any script. Like, are there any really bad interactions with it that you can think of? Because I'm not really sure I can think of anything. Like, maybe again, don't put it on scripts that have like all the other conditional game enders with it for the most part. But that's true of all of the others. So.
Our podcast is now being put on tier ranking by chat, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I can't really find anything that's hugely wrong with the Klutz. I think it's a pretty good character that you can put almost wherever you want. Yeah, I find it hard to find an issue with the Klutz. It doesn't set the world on fire. It doesn't. It's one that scores very highly on the can go on any script, and low to medium on the build a script around it metric. So I think I'd be okay with an A, but I would also be fine with an S tier for the Klutz. So what do you reckon?
I don't know. I really can't find anything wrong with it. So I like, everybody's saying A, but I feel like S is where it actually belongs. Like, it's got the versatility. It's got no real issues with it. So
sure, fine by me. Let's put it into an S tier. Let's have an S tier outsider. Do we have any? Oh yeah, we've got the damsel,
the drunk and the
drunk,
damsel,
and the butler,
and the butler, of course.
How can we forget? And I think that we're about halfway through. I don't know if we're exactly halfway through, but I think that the knight, as one of the two newest characters, is a fun place to leave this discussion. What do you think?
Sure, I'm good with that.
So the knight, very high on the can be put onto any script discussion, for sure. I think I don't think it's S tier. I think that it is at its absolute peak when it's on a script with Riot and Leviathan. That's where I like it most. But I think it's a very, very solid A, high A.
I can agree with that.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it doesn't play very well with Vortox if the good team can solve that it's a Vortox game, for example, right. Because then it's just like, here's your free Sage, in a non-Vortox game information, and that doesn't feel very good.
Yeah. So I think With Vortox and Legion, it's a bit too powerful. With everything else, it's fine to a little bit underwhelming, in my opinion. But that's discussing it. That's discussing its strength as a character, which of course we're not here to do. But it doesn't have any spectacular interactions with any characters other than those two, which are a little bit negative. But
yeah, it's questionable with Little Monster. But
yeah, that's fair.
I think that's more a storyteller issue than it is specifically a Little Monster issue, to be fair.
Yeah, I think that it's important to give the Knight, and we'll come back to it later next time we talk about this, of course, but the Knight and the Steward both need a storyteller that is willing to use their ability for the good team.
Yeah, which is, again, a storyteller issue and not exactly sure. the ability or how well it fits on a script issue.
Yeah, so we're going to leave that there because I notice, not only because that lets us talk about the Knight as our final character that we talk about, but also because I notice that Legion and Leviathan are the next two characters, and that'll be fun.
Oh boy.
That is your incentive to come back and talk and listen to us as we talk about this probably 2 weeks from now. Unless we come up with something better, in which case 4 weeks from now. But probably 2 weeks from now. I think we'll probably finish this one off while we are doing that. So yeah, that will be. I'm going to upload this one to YouTube soon, I promise. So that if you're watching this on YouTube before the 5th of May, it will be on the 5th of June. That will be on the 5th of June. So yeah, do check back on the 5th of June when we finish off this list ranking. But yeah, that is everything that we have for you today. We're going to look at these final 70 odd characters in our next episode of Script Notes. So do tune into that. I will be back here tomorrow for running some games with the Knight, which we just talked about, and also with our little friendly Steward over here. So do also check in for that one. It'll be great fun. And I think that actually the next time we talk about, we finish this off next Script Notes, that will be the last Script Notes before we get you back. Is that right?
Well, considering I don't know how time works, shrug, but probably.
Well, that'll be the 5th.
If you say it, then sure.
That'll be the 5th of June, so that'll be the first Monday in June that we finish this off.
All right, then yes.
Wonderful. But I'll be here every Tuesday and Sunday, and occasionally on Friday. Until then, so do join me. And where can people find you?
Well, you can find me here every other Monday, and starting in June, I'll be back on Tuesdays, and you can find me on Fridays on Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower. And
what are you doing on Friday on Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower this week, Navian?
Well, our friend Tomato will not be available because his work is stupid. So I will be joined by some guests who will be co-STing with me.
Lovely. I look forward to that one. Should be, tune into that one on Friday at 2 o'clock my time. Or what is it? 8 o'clock your time? On the Eastern?
Yes, 8 p.m. Eastern.
That is 1 a.m. if you're in the UK. I'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. European time, 7 p.m. UK time, and 2 p.m. Eastern. So see you tomorrow. But until then, have a great evening. And we'll see you soon. Good night.
Bye.